Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. My guest today is a 20-year vet on the Board of Education for San Ramon Valley Unified School Districts. He's actually the president of the Board of Education, and he has been in education at the executive level for 30 years. Very informative, very thorough, and very eye-opening when it comes to seemingly tricky decisions that have been made. And again, I was just very pleased I got the chance to talk to him. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Without further ado, the man, the myth, the legend, Greg Marvel. Big interest. So I agree with you 100% that the value of writing has been so minimized for so many years that you get whole generations of people that don't know how to express themselves effectively. They don't know how to get points across. They have a million points. They have underdeveloped points. And so the attack on the schools of journalism, that's a real thing because people say, look, papers are dying, right? I mean, local papers are dying. News broadcasting is dying, right? Because you have people on the internet very easily doing their own effectively news broadcasts on a variety of topics that can reach everyone. But just like philosophy departments, the value of the way of thought, the value of learning the specific tools like writing, like expressing points, like figuring out nuances of arguments, that's something that's not replaced. As you lose journalism schools, as you lose philosophy departments, I was a rhetoric major at Cal. I went in as math, but I switched to rhetoric.
And you didn't go become a lawyer?
You know what? Very interesting. No. This is it. That's very astute. So I went in as a math major, learned how to write, switched to rhetoric to be an attorney. But I fell in love with writing and I realized, oh, this really isn't that bad if you have a good teacher. And so I started tutoring while I was at Cal. I would tutor the other students. So then when I graduated, I applied to law school, went through the whole thing, and then started tutoring privately while I waited. And that was it. So by the time I heard back from law schools, I had, 3 or 4 students that I was working with. And I said, I really like teaching. Why not just keep teaching? So that's
what you did.
Yeah.
Although you don't make as much as a lawyer. Depending on which. My daughter went to Cal.
Yeah.
Always been a great writer. She was at post-high school level in her language arts when she was like 9 years old.
No kidding.
Just one of these bright kids. And she toured Monte Vista, but the principal took her on a tour, and she came home and she talked, and she was crying. She says, "It's too big. I'll be lost there, and I'll get held back," because she realized that she was brighter than the average bear, and kids get taught, based on the pace of the class. And if she's doing college level work and she's a 9th grader, she's going to get held back. So we put her into venture. It was great. The venture program in the district, it's phenomenal. So she's 14 years old. We all remember things from our lives. It brings tears to my eyes when I think about it. I took my daughter to kindergarten for the first time, and she got cute little pigtails, and off she goes into kindergarten, and she's afraid, as I think every kindergartner is. And she was grown up. She didn't need to have daddy take her. So I'm watching her in the car as she's heading off to her first class, and I'm thinking, oh my God, they grow up so fast. And then she's 14, and I drop her off, and again, you don't take me in. She's taking her first college class at 14.
God.
At DVC. And I had the same tears well up into my eyes, my little kids going. And then she got into Cal, and she got into USC and Cal and UCLA, and then her friends from law school are very upset that she went to Cal instead of UCLA. She has some UCLA friends, but she because she wanted to be an architectural major. She thought,
architecture is the architecture at Cal is a very interesting department, isn't it?
It is. It's a 4-year program. You have to there's different philosophies about architecture. So some you graduate, like at USC, you graduate after 5 years, but now you've taken all the coursework equivalent of a master's, and you can take the test to become an architect. At Cal, you do a 4-year program, and then you have to get into their master's program to then complete what SC does in the same amount of time, but it's two separate programs. And yeah, USC was also, it's private and very expensive. And I told my daughter, I promised you could go to college on my dime, but I saved a lot of money, but not a king's ransom, which is what it was going to cost, about $300,000 for her to go to, and that was in those days, to go to USC School of Architecture. And I'm glad it didn't work out, because after a year she changed her major.
Well, look at that.
She took calculus, which is their weed out course. Every professional school has a weed out course. And at Cal it was advanced calculus, which she'd gotten A's at when she went to DVC. So nope. She got her first B. I think she'd gotten in forever. And she went, oh no, I don't think I want to be an architect. So she changed her major to political science. And at the time, I told her she was going to be either a teacher, she was going to work as a staff member for a politician, or she was going to be a lawyer. Those are the 3 things you could do with that degree. And she said heck no to all 3. She got out of Cal, got her first job. She worked for the ambassador from the European Union to the U.S. in Washington, D.C. for a year. And sort of like a politician. I'm taking credit for that one. So there's one box checked.
Gotcha.
She has great stories about the embassy parties, by the way. I guess they're pretty wild. They're pretty good.
Well, they have diplomatic immunity, right?
Yeah, right. So she got to go to all the embassy parties, so she loved that. And then she went, she got a job at Chevron, doing work in their inferential, what was it? IT Forensics was the group that she worked with, which was a combination IT and legal department. And they really liked her. She was a temp. They really liked her, and they sent her to all these workshops all over the country, and they were all other lawyers. They were lawyers. She wasn't a lawyer. She had no intention of being a lawyer, but she was getting it. The light bulbs are always coming on. She said, oh, I get that. And then the guy that is now, I think he's the legal counsel, he's the head counsel for Chevron, was her boss, and he said, you may have a thing for this. You might want to think about being a lawyer. So she took the LSATs, aced them, got like, I don't know, what's the maximum you can get?
You can get 180. So if she hit 170,
she was
that's
like 178.
smoking.
I think she would have gotten 180, but she got screwed up on a question or something. She got like 178. So she got into every law school she wanted to go into, and now she's a lawyer, and people from all over the firm. She has a huge 47 office international law firm. They call her from all over the country to prepare briefs, review their arguments, clean it up. She's telling 25-year, 30-year partners that their writing is crap, and here's how to change it to make it better.
It's a tough conversation with your boss.
It is, but that. It was all about writing, and she was a really great writer at 9, and I knew it because she played Boggle. We played Boggle. You ever play Boggle with your kids?
No.
It's a phenomenal. So you're looking for words, right, in this thing. By about 9 or 10, she could beat me, and I'm pretty smart. I mean, I was a college vice chancellor. I'm not that dumb, and 9, 10, she's beaten me at Boggle. She has ever since. So we play Boggle now. She loves it. She loves to lord it over me, and so she'll get 40 points and I'll get 12.
Man, we play Cars Monopoly. Like, we don't, we're not hitting the Boggle yet. Although my son is finishing. He's in 3rd grade. He is finishing the 5th Harry Potter book, which I'm pleased with. I didn't fall in love with the writing until I was much older, but he loves it. He loves the stories.
Well, I couldn't read worth a darn in 1st grade. I had a teacher who inspired me. She said, over the summer, Greg, I remember her name, Rohrberg. They were 3, Rohrberg, Tuesberg, and Feinberg. They're all Germans, right? And 1st and 2nd grade teachers. She said, you need to work on your reading. And she told me you had to go to the children's library, which is about 2 blocks from the little town we lived in, and and you try to read a book a week. Well, it inspired me, and I ended up reading a book a day. So I ended up being a really great reader, and I like to think because of my journalism teachings, I ended up being a pretty good writer, and I think it's the foundation of all learning. If you can't read, you're not going to be able to be effective at just about anything else, whether it's learning or having a job, being able to advance socioeconomically. If you can't read, you're at a massive disadvantage. I think it's the number one foundational skill in schools that ought to be taught effectively. So I was part of that huge debate back in the 80s when about whole language versus phonics, and I was on the phonics side. I lost on that issue. Ultimately, I was right because the data now shows that whole language instruction was absolutely horrendous. A whole generation of kids failed to learn how to read effectively. From phonics we used for hundreds of years, and then somebody came up with a bright new idea and decided to use millions of kids as guinea pigs.
Do you feel like that parallels the Common Core issues that we're facing right now in school?
I think it can. I think public education is fraught with the next best thing without having a clear foundation of data to show that this is, in fact, the new best thing. And our kids are often used as guinea pigs. So I think we didn't have much choice with Common Core because it was the law. The issue for me was, how do you implement it in an effective way? We have to follow the law is the law, but how do you implement it in an effective way that doesn't ultimately use our kids as guinea pigs? And our test scores after Common Core continued to go up, whereas most districts, they tanked under Common Core. Because I looked at what other districts were doing. They were implementing it poorly. We didn't. We invested the money and the resources and the staff training to make it as effective as we could. And so when you look at other districts on the news, they or on the internet, they would have an example of, here's a math problem that made absolutely no sense unless you were literally mentally ill or schizophrenic.
Right, I've seen some of those for sure.
Absolutely no sense. And then they point that out, well, that's how Common Core is everywhere. No. Some districts actually implemented it correctly. And the concept of Common Core was a good one in the sense that a skill set you learn over on the left side over here is something that can be used in this subject over here, right? They help build on each other. That was so in other words, a skill isn't a silo. It's something that you use then to build on other things. So whether it's reading comprehension that then allows you to understand the word problems that you're going to get in math, on the SATs or something, or understanding how to effectively separate the different arguments in a news article. Those are all things that a reading skill, rhetoric, you can learn how to use it effectively, and kids are better able to prepare for life, for jobs, for college. I have a real simple philosophy. The role of any school, whether it's a private school or a public school, is that when they leave the halls of our schools, they leave the door for the last time, every door possible of opportunity is open for them. And where we've failed as educators is if we can't get there, if there are doors that are still closed. Now, sometimes kids, sadly, decide on their own that they don't want every door open. They've either checked out, they're rebellious, they make bad life decisions. Sadly, the greatest gift God gave us was free will. The greatest burden gave us was free will. So by the time I think Abraham Lincoln said, you're responsible for your own actions by the time you hit 14. Because by 14, we all know. Well, you haven't hit there yet with your kids, but
yeah. But I deal with the 16 and 17-year-olds every single day.
Right. So you hope they make the right choices. You've trained them to hopefully make the right choices. Parents have, the schools have. Character matters. There's all kinds of things you can do. The DARE programs, just say no. There's all kinds of things you can do. But ultimately, every child has free will. So what you end up doing is you hope every door is open. You make all the steps necessary for every door is open. And for many of them, they are. And if you look at what our college rates are incredibly high, some of the highest in the state. Our proficiency rates are incredibly high. Much higher than they were when I got on the board 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we were a good district. We weren't a great district. There were schools in Mount Diablo Unified, not viewed with great respect by most people in the educational establishment today. 20 years ago, some of those schools were better than ours. Monte Vista, which at that time was our highest ranked school, was lower than a high school in Mount Diablo Unified. So one of the reasons I ran for the board, I wanted to ask my fellow, but by that time now, my fellow board members, how come? What are we doing wrong that they're doing right? Because I'm a big proponent of trying to not believe we have all the answers, but somewhere, someplace, somebody's figured something out and they're doing better than we are. Why don't we emulate it? Let's find out what we can bring over, pour it over, and use in this district. So we were very isolated and insulated as a school district because we thought we were great. And we acted like we were great, which is the first sign that you're not great.
That's fair.
Yeah, right. So I've always said that when you think you're at the pinnacle and you act like you're at the pinnacle, you've reached the top of the mountain, you've reached educational nirvana or selling nirvana or software development nirvana, whatever, that is the point at which you begin your downhill slide to oblivion and ultimately bankruptcy. School districts can't go bankrupt in the classic sense. They don't go out of business. They get taken over. But they can bankrupt the quality of the educational process. And so what I believe in, and I was successful in getting the rest of my board members to, reluctantly at first, and then they bought into it over the last 20 years, that we have to learn that because we think we're doing a great job doesn't mean we are. And even if we are doing a great job, are we doing a perfect job? And the answer in almost all cases is no, we're not. So what are we going to do to push ourselves? What are we going to do to work with our teachers and our principals to find out what's working and what isn't working, and to get, as an example, every kid above the 90th percentile in proficiency? I think we're on our AP classes. We offer more AP classes than most districts. We've received an award for the last, I think, 12 years from the College Board. We have constantly increased our number of AP participants, and we keep raising our scores on the AP, and our at-risk kids and our minority kids and our poverty, low socioeconomic kids are all getting better test scores every year. So we've done that consistently for over a decade. Only one in North America that's gotten that award, by the way, that many times. So we're constantly having to figure out why whereas right now we're at 86%. Managed to get 3 or above, which is what counts, right, on the APs. My response is, why aren't we at 90%? What are we going to do to push us over to 90? So people look at me like I'm crazy. We're better than the vast majority of districts in California. But that means we've got 14% of the kids that take AP that we have somehow, they haven't got enough, they didn't absorb enough, they didn't learn enough to be able to get a score that the College Board, the College Board accepted.
Right, and so, of course, the onus on a situation like that, where you have a student who willingly signs up for an AP test, they know what they're getting into.
Right.
The onus on the failure lands, in my opinion, on the educator. I mean, it's the way I view my education with my students. If students don't do well, I mean, look, there are all kinds of things that can happen, but the bottom line is if the kid is willing and they don't do it, then you can't point at the kid. The kid wanted to learn the math. He wanted to learn the chemistry.
We had a situation a number of years ago where we used to basically have a gatekeeper process. You didn't get to take an AP class unless somebody approved you to take an AP class. There was a prerequisite you had to do and things like that. That was years ago, a number of years ago. It's been so long, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. It was quite a long time ago. And we had this giant debate about on the board about, is this something we want to do? Because people pointed out that you can hurt yourself. You take an AP class and get a C, and you take an AP class and don't pass, that could hurt you potentially. And you've got kids in the class that can't keep up potentially with the brighter kids, the superstars that they can study for 10 minutes a day and get an A on anything. I hate kids like that. I always did when I was a kid, right? My God, I spend 3 hours trying to understand calculus, and you spend 10 minutes and get it.
But they get theirs eventually. They get theirs.
I love
all those kids that don't study, man, they finally get to the weater classes, and it's all over.
It's my daughter in calculus.
I'm not taking a dig at you.
At Cal.
I apologize. On this point, okay, I have a lot of students and families that go to San Ramon Valley High School, and overwhelmingly one of the things, they love the school, and there's an enormous amount of pride and investment, which is wonderful. And there are always questions about the math department, and it seems like one of those things. It's like the elephant in the room. It's like everybody knows that everyone struggles in this math department. Everybody knows that when I work with students from San Ramon Valley High School for the SAT, the vast majority of them say, "Hey, look, I'm work hard. I don't quite get math," and it always comes to pass. Hey, it's not that you don't get math. There were some slips here along the way. Obviously, there were holes. You missed a step somewhere, and you can patch those up. But it seems to be one of those things that's open and out there, and everybody knows, but it's persisting. And again, perhaps you don't agree with me, and that's totally fine. Please tell me if you do. But if you do, if you see that as well, what do you think that is?
I think that, and I've heard this before recently, as I've met with parents, they've told me about, they think there's something missing in math at San Ramon Valley High. I've heard it. And so that's one of the things I'm going to be tasked with my fellow board members and the superintendent, having a discussion. And as you know, we're going to be recruiting in the spring for a new principal. What can we do to figure out what's working and what isn't working? And again, that isn't intended as a slight on the existing staff at San Ramon Valley High. Remember what I said earlier. If we think we've reached nirvana, we haven't, and two, we're beginning to slip, because kids change, culture changes, the need changes, the techniques to teach, whatever it is, physics, chemistry, math, the techniques change. People come up with a new idea. The bottom line is we have to have a vibrant, alive educational process in math. It doesn't mean everybody's going to become a mathematician.
Right.
But what's working, what isn't working. And our greatest feedback comes from our kids, the customers, if you will.
Sure.
And so if that hasn't in the past been taken seriously, we need to find out, one, why it hasn't. The interim principal needs to understand that that's something that needs to get tasked to figure out. Because what I prefer to hear is we have the best math department at San Ramon Valley High that anybody's ever seen. And I think we've got great math teachers. How do we turn the reputation around? Because I've heard that from probably a dozen parents.
And do you think it's more of that kind of like a branding issue, where it's not necessarily that San Ramon Valley, from a quantitative standpoint,
right.
Like if you looked at the scores, you said, hey, look, our scores are not much worse. Maybe they're not better, and that's on us. That's a problem with us. Mm-hmm. But they're not really that much worse. What's happening is that people feel that they're not getting the same type of education. And I think one of the problems that you run into with any with any large population like we have here in Monte Vista and San Ramon, especially well-heeled parents that have resources that they're dedicating to their kids, and fantastic, by the way. I mean, they're investing in their kids. They want their kids to be successful. As people get tutors, I used to tutor for general prep. Okay, so it would be just math or English or whatever people needed. And I realized kind of towards the end of it, I don't do it now, but I realized towards the end of it that people, especially students, would say, hey, look, my friend has a math tutor, I need a math tutor. And the way that people started learning the material was different, because instead of going home, like what I did, right, I grew up in Concord, and if I had a question in calculus, I went home with my math book, and I looked at the math book, and I, grind, and I would grind, and I would grind, and I'd figure it out, or I wouldn't, right? I wasn't a perfect student, but I was doing the best with what I had, and I would get through the classes, and I would get grades, and I ended up going to Cal as well. So I figured out how to learn. What I saw a little bit more, especially in the last decade, is instead of students doing that, they're leaning more towards privatizing that portion of their education and saying, okay, well, I have a question. I'm not going to grind on my math book here. Mom, my friend has a tutor. I need a tutor. So all of a sudden you have a lot of parents saying, hey, why is it that I have a tutor? We all have tutors for math. This must be a fault of the education system. Do you think it's that's actually true, or that people are shifting more towards privatizing portions of their education? Instead of parents taking up the mantle and helping students, instead of students helping students, instead of students leaning more on their teachers at school, they're saying, hey, let's just throw some money at it. Let's get a tutor and let's iron this out.
I think we're in such a highly competitive educational environment today. It seems like every parent expects their kid to go to Cal or Stanford, or my daughter gets very upset when I say Stanford.
It's fair.
I know.
It's fair. I was going to let it slide, but
or UCLA or MIT or wherever, because that's what you need to get into in order to be successful. I don't agree with that mantra, but that's what's going on. So I think when I was going to college, when you were going to college, I think the competition was not as intense as it is today. So that's, I think, problem number one. I think you could have literally the best teacher walking the face of the earth, and you'd still have parents getting
tutors.
A tutor. I think so. That's reality. So I don't think it's fair to blame teachers because a family feels they want to get a tutor. Having said that, every teacher needs to understand, and they're taught this way. It doesn't mean that's always practiced, because we have 4,000 employees in this district. So
sure.
We have a wide range. I think the vast majority of our teachers do a phenomenal job. But you always have those exceptions where the teacher, and we've all experienced in our educational experiences, where we have a teacher who teaches one way. That's the only way. And you could have 30 kids in the class, and you need different modalities. What kids will find, some are auditory, some are visual, but that teacher doesn't care. Teacher teaches one way, and you get it his way, you don't get it at all. That's the reality. And we've all had teachers like that. I had a chemistry teacher like that in high school. Oh my Lord. Got the first C I'd ever gotten in high school.
Me too. AP Chem.
Oh yeah,
it was not my jam.
It was horrible. But I went to the counselor, got switched the next semester to a different chemistry teacher, and I got an A. I was like a sophomore or something. So I remember my counselor always shaking his head, going, "Oh my God, I can't believe C to an A, C to an A." I said it was the teacher. That teacher understood how my brain worked and was able to convey the information I needed so that I could do a good job on the tests, on the homework, and then, by the way, not blow up the chem lab, in the process.
It's important.
It's kind of an important issue.
I think that's totally fair. I think what you said is 100% true. You could have the best teacher in the world, and you will still have some students getting tutors. And again, because of what you said, we live in an incredibly competitive area academically. And so you're going to have students trying to push themselves and keep the pace with subjects that they may not be otherwise inclined to push if they were in, say, a different environment, but they are pushing. And that's the point. Students are pushing. And as educators, we're trying to figure out ways to help them be successful, because there's nothing worse, as you were saying, than somebody trying to push themselves and landing flat on their face, getting a C or not passing an AP class, right? So how do you support them in that way?
Well, and that's one of the things I wanted to get back, circle back around to that, the whole issue of AP. One of the things that I advocated for back then, 10, 12 years ago, when we decided to eliminate all the pre-reqs, basically you had to get a recommendation from a teacher to take certain AP classes. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to leave it to you, the parents and the student, to decide if you're ready for AP. Just understand that there are both pluses and minuses to that, and you could be hurting yourself academically if you're left behind because it's above your skill set. And you just need to understand that. And kids, good way a good way for a kid to lose that spark, that fire in their belly for learning, is to get so far behind in a course that
they just give up.
They give up, right? And then does that translate to giving up on other things as well? So it was a gamble, and we were very clear to everybody when we did it. We think this is the right thing to do, but you need to understand that there are consequences if you. What was that line in one of the Indiana Jones? He chose
poorly,
right?
Yeah.
Right? So you've got to make that decision, and it's actually proven to be the absolute right choice that we made. Our AP course offerings have gone up. Our participation has gone up. More of our lower socioeconomic kids, more of our at-risk kids, more of our minority kids are taking classes to help close. We're closing the achievement gap, if you will, one kid at a time by offering more AP courses. Now, the reason AP obviously is important is not only helps because it's a weighted grade, it helps to raise your GPA, but it also lets colleges know and universities know that you're able to take college-level work. Now, one of the things, having worked as I was a college vice chancellor, one of the things that I'm acutely aware is the application process, admissions process. And I have friends in universities and colleges who are in that process. And what they tell me is AP is absolutely critical for a person's ability, a student's ability to get into the yes pile versus the no pile. But even more important are taking actual college courses in a college environment. So one of the things that we've been pushing for the last couple, 3 years is the ability in this district for you to take concurrent enrollment classes at DVC, as an example, or at the San Ramon Valley Center, which is over in the Doherty Valley part of DVC, so that you're able, Las Positas, we don't care where you take it. What you do is it's like an AP, but it's AP on steroids.
Because it's an actual college course.
It's an actual college course taught by professors who expect a college level of performance from the kids assembled, the students assembled in that class. And here's what's important, it has a credibility with the admissions offices that I think is critical. So if you have a choice between, so my daughter, use my daughter as a perfect example. So when she took college level work, she actually never took an AP course in the district. She took college level work at DVC. So when she graduated from the district, she had 60 units of DVC college level work.
So she was a junior. Going into Berkeley, she was a junior.
Well,
120 units to graduate. She's got 60 banged out.
Unfortunately, she wanted the full 4-year experience. Because daddy's paying, who cares, right? But what it did,
I wanted to get out of college. There's this whole push. It's like, hey, let's go for fifth. Are you insane?
I know.
I mean, you're beholden to other people all day long. I wanted to get out into the world
right.
and live and make money and add value somehow. Anyway, I'm sorry. Keep
No.
going.
I tried that argument. It didn't work. But bottom line, here's the key. She got into Berkeley, in my opinion, because she was bright. She had a 4.25 GPA, and so do thousands of other kids that applied that get rejected. What made her different? She had 60 units of college level work that they knew she was a known commodity. They knew that if they admitted her, she wasn't going to fail because she couldn't handle the workload. They knew she wasn't going to drop out after her freshman year.
Sure.
So
if I may, I'm very sorry for interrupting.
No
Is this the impetus behind the college connection and the potential of dropping the seventh period? Was it, hey, look, let's give our students the ability to take real college courses? Or is that right. Kind of a separate thing for you?
No, it's all part of the same thing. Again, it's usually I'm a big picture person. I'm a big advocate of not just doing one little thing, but looking how we do a whole bunch of things that properly coordinated have a big impact on kids. Because again, it's all about best for kids. So the PLIs, the personal learning initiatives that this board championed, with some opposition from some people in the community and some educators, that it was ultimately the right thing to do. What we've heard back from 75-80% of when we do surveys, they think it's the best darn thing since sliced bread. It was great for them. They were able to take things at their own pace. They were able to take college level work. They were able to take fewer courses at the district, to take them at other places, like at a DVC or a Las Positas. It ultimately gave them the ability to create their own menu, if you will, of learning opportunities that the old method really didn't. It was a very structured process. Now, some people love structure, and those that wanted it, we didn't take that away from them. If you want to be structured, you can. But for those that wanted to tailor their own level of initiatives, their own level of courses, their own type of courses, we gave them the ability to do that. You have to meet the minimums, obviously. You have to take language arts. You're going to have to take math. You're going to have to take history. Blah. But all the initiatives around options above the core, the base cores, I think we've provided an incredible advantage in this district that most other districts don't offer. And it's, again, my underlying philosophy of having as many doors possible open. When they leave us as 12th graders, every door possible is open, as much as we're able to provide them and as much as they want them. So a good example, some kids don't want to do A through G. You got to do A through G. You want to go to UC, may not be Berkeley, maybe you want to go to Santa Cruz, you want to go to Riverside,
sure,
whatever.
You want to go somewhere.
Right. You got A through G. You got to do your A through Gs, different courses. Some kids don't want to do that. We don't require it. Some districts do, by the way. They say you're not going to graduate from us in 12th grade if you haven't done your A through Gs. And we have, as a board, we have not had that discussion. I'd love to have that discussion. I could, because I can argue both sides. But I firmly believe that because every kid is different. Every child comes with their own set of values, their own set of needs, their own set of passions, if you will, about what they want to do with their life, their own interests. And if you create too much of a shoebox approach, cookie cutter approach, I'm not sure ultimately that's beneficial to kids. So the PLIs allow you to take the coursework above the minimums required to graduate in your own way. You can do it at the district. You can do it in a college environment. Whatever is going to fit your needs, your passions, what you want to excel at, you're free to do that. And I think that's what's so valuable and powerful about the PLIs. There's no other district that does it quite like us. And I think the feedback, now we've done it enough, I think the feedback is highly, highly positive from the people that matter. That's the kids and the parents.
Gotcha. You're kind of tagging on to another big question that I've had that I'm wondering about. It's okay, so everybody's aware that the SATs are all over the place as far as being required for colleges this year, right? SATs, tests, everything in general. And the UCs are appealing a decision by an Alameda judge saying that they're discriminatory and need to be thrown out immediately. They're appealing that. But there will still be lots of schools that make them optional. And the UCs in 4 years will just go blind to them. They won't even see them. So we have this lead up. Right. Let's say the UCs still look at them for 2 years, or the CSUs still look at them, and then they start weeding them out. We have this lead up to a portion of the California universities eliminating them from the admissions. That leaves just your GPA, your extracurricular activities, and your transcripts. Right. What are things you think that we could get our district involved in that would continue to distinguish our students in the admissions process? Because again, if you're eliminating the largest quantitative factor, which is again these test scores, how do we get our Monte Vista, our Santa Mona, our Doherty Valley, all of these schools that have some of the brightest students in the state?
Right.
How do we get them to be distinguished? Whoa, watch out there. How do we get them to be distinguished, continue to distinguish them on an application?
That is a phenomenally good question. First of all, I don't agree with the concept that SATs are discriminatory.
How dare you, sir?
I know.
How could you?
I know.
You mean math is not really discriminatory? Okay, anyway, keep going.
I try to understand how the discriminatory. I think frankly what it is, I'm going to say something that's probably controversial. Wouldn't be the first time, but
you got to take risks.
You got to take risks, right? I believe that many public school districts in California are doing an incredible disservice to our minority kids, our kids of poverty, our Black and Hispanic kids. And I think getting rid of the SATs are one way to hide the abysmal performance that public schools have done, not just in California, across the country. If you're in a large urban district with a high minority population, statistically, the odds are the Hispanic and the African American kids coming out of that district are probably going to not have the same quality of education as kids coming from a suburban school district. And the question is why? Some proponents say, well, the problem is a lack of money. They need more money, okay? Well, many districts in California, we're the second lowest funded in California, by the way, among K-12 districts. Second lowest funded.
Really? Is that because of the demographics of the population?
The local control funding formula implemented by Governor Brown was intended to move vast amounts of money, educational money from the state, to large urban districts, with the underlying premise that they were failing their kids because they didn't have enough money.
And I want to keep you going. I just want to emphasize, you're saying San Ramon Valley Unified School District is the second lowest funded in the entire state.
Correct. Among K-12s.
So when people ask, why do we keep getting hit up for fundraisers, the fun run, the educational fund, the bake sale, any time that the school district wants $1 from you, you're number two worst funded.
That's right.
Okay.
There is some, I used to say at one point, when people look at numbers, look at rankings by state, I think at one point we were 49th in the nation on funding on a per pupil basis at one point in California. And I once said, thank God for Mississippi, because Mississippi was 50th, right? And I don't know who the district is that's lower funded than us, but thank God that there's at least somebody below
You don't
us.
want to be number one? I thought you wanted to be number one in everything here, man. Come on.
Clearly, you're mathematically dyslexic. You want to be
Apparently.
want to be number one at the top, not at the bottom. So, So the bottom line is LCFF moved billions of dollars to large urban districts with high minority populations because of the false belief, in my opinion, that money was the solution to solve the problem. I've been in education for a very long time. I was an executive in a large urban district with a high minority population. We did a great job with our test scores. Our test scores were double what they were at district next door that also served a large urban minority population. Because it wasn't money. It was attitude, it was mentality, it was an expectation that was held high for teachers and principals and administrators and kids to do the best job possible. Kids are like sponges. If you have a low level, if you set the bar low, kids will try to achieve that bar. If you set the bar high, kids will try to achieve that bar. And what happened under LCFF is that billions were funneled to large urban districts, and in many cases, their test scores have continued to decline. They haven't gotten better because it shows the lie that money is the solution to everything. Money is not the solution. We're the poster child for money is not the answer for everything.
It's kind of like the A's athletic team. It's like when they swept the Yankees, I think it was 8 years ago in that series, they went 4-0 against the Yankees. I think the Yankees it was like 3 guys on the Yankees represented the entire budget for the Oakland A's.
Right, exactly. Right. So it isn't all about money. Money is certainly a part of it. I'm not implying that it isn't. But if you say the solution, and politicians typically think that they look for the simplistic answers, and the simplistic answers are rarely the right answers. It's always a very complex issue with a lot of different things you have to do to make things work. They took one part of the answer, which was, well, they need more funding, and that's all they looked at because that was easy. Just throw more money at them. Now, how did they throw more money at them? They threw more money by taking money from us, from districts like us. The end result is, and don't mean to diminish the importance and the difficulty of teaching minority students from poverty backgrounds how to be educated appropriately, how to be competitive, how to be able to get into college or jobs or whatever you want to do, to be at the same level as suburban districts. But money isn't the only answer, because you take an Oakland Unified as an example that gets thousands and thousands and thousands more per student than we do. And how's their test scores working out? How are their proficiency rates working out? How's their dropout rate working out? So it isn't all about, and of course the answer is they're doing a horrible job. That isn't to diminish the difficulty. I fully, having worked in a large urban district, I fully understand the difficulties, the challenges of trying to take a child and get them away from the allure of gangs, get them away from, I can make the quick bucks if I'm selling crack on the street at 16, or I can and the poor decisions that ultimately sometimes kids make, driven by the poverty that surrounds them and the peer pressure that surrounds them. Don't mean to diminish that, but I would have much preferred money had been spent and efforts had been spent on those issues than just giving, 15, 16, 17, 20,000 a year to a failing school district and say, here, go for it.
Right. And it's not even, I think it's a disservice to say it's just, gangs and drugs. I think that's,
no, right.
Because
it's
you work with,
a complex issue.
It's a hyper complex, and you have students that are straight-laced, that are trying to do their best, but you're surrounded by such an abysmal environment that it's kind of like, look, even if you go to Oakland Tech and you're still trying hard, you're going to have a really difficult time finding a place to study quietly to get the support like you would, say, at Monte Vista.
So what you're doing is you're saying, you're echoing what I'm saying is,
yes,
it's a complex issue.
Hyper-complex.
And so one solution can't be the only answer. Right. And so if you don't provide them with additional resources, and yet you expect higher test scores, higher graduation rates, higher going to college rates, and all those things, and you haven't given them the resources necessary for those high expectations, then that will also fail. So it's a combination of the two. We didn't do that in this state. We just gave them the money and said, yeah, go for it. And, it's proven a disaster. We have districts within commute distance of the San Ramon Valley that get 3 times the per pupil support than we do. 24 to 27,000 a year. We get 8,000 a year. So I will take, before the COVID hit, or the pandemic hit, we were getting around 17,000 a year from parents. Okay? If we got the same amount as some districts in reasonable commute distance from us, I would say, thank you, parents, keep your 17 million. I'll take the 1.2 billion in additional revenue I would get as a district if we got what other districts were getting. Some other districts were getting, the larger ones. The other ones we would get, some of the ones that are higher than us but not 300% higher, maybe we'd only get 150 or 200 million more. I'll take that too. And you can keep your 17 million, thank you. Use it for stuff with your family. But we're not in that situation. There's no political will in this state to do it. And so the reality of what we're faced with as a school district is we get around 8,000 a year, and with that we have to try to do the best job that we can. And so so this gets to the long thing about, I think SATs, getting rid of them is wrong. Discounting them is wrong, because I believe what it's an attempt to do is hide from the public the dismal reality of what is happening in a lot of large urban school districts in this state. So I don't think it's discriminatory at all in terms of the results. The results are the results. If you don't understand 2 and 2 is 4, you're definitely not going to probably do well in the math on the SAT. But what we need to look at, rather than getting rid of the inconvenient truths, or hide the inconvenient truths that SATs show us, what we should be doing is figuring out why minority kids are doing lower on the SATs, and we need to fix that, because that is ultimately it's a sign that we're failing a segment of our community in this state. And the answer from the politicians and the answer from the educational bigwigs in this state is we need to hide that reality.
Sure.
And I say no, we need to expose it. We need to expose the reality for what it is, a failure in the part of our schools to fix the problem with our minority kids.
But it's too, so you have the God of the gaps, right? There's this lack of understanding initially of, okay, why is this? So I'm Mexican. I grew up in Concord, went to Ignacio Valley High School, which I think has like 70% Hispanic population. So some very, very large. And the vast majority of that population is English second language. So you have this very rough kind of population from an English and education standpoint. Those are not classically the people that move on to 4-year universities. But there's obviously a lack of understanding of, okay, why is it that within even the same schools, same teachers, same administrators, you have minorities like Hispanic students, for instance, scoring lower than Caucasian students. And it's so politically convenient to fill that gap in understanding with it's discrimination, it's racism, it's because I'm Mexican, that's why. This test has it out for me because I score lower. Now, mind you, I, as a second-generation Mexican-American going to a very not great school, I needed the SAT because my GPA was fine. My GPA was not bad at all, but it's a 4.0 from Ignacio Valley is not the same as a 4.0 from, say, Monte Vista or Doherty Valley or something like that. It's just not.
And
you're
dealing. Colleges know that.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I tell people is, hey, your 3.5 from San Ramon is not like a 3.5 from Pittsburgh. You have to realize that, and it depends on the classes. But the point is, as I was taking this test, I knew going into the test, which I took December of my senior year once, because obviously I didn't have great college counseling. YV was not known for its college acceptance. But I knew I needed that test to distinguish myself because, again, my GPA was fine. I was in music. I was on 3 different sports teams. I had work and volunteer, but I needed to show them quantitatively that I was capable academically. And that was my big distinguishing factor. If you took that away from my application, it would be an enormous problem. So again, coming back to the
You're absolutely right.
I greatly appreciate your lengthy and perhaps not popular opinion. I very much agree with a lot of it. My question though is, as the president of the Board of Education, you are charged with making our students as competitive as possible in the college admissions. And although you and I may disagree with removing this quantitative piece, it is a piece of admissions that classically the San Ramon Valley Unified has done very well at achieving, right? I mean, we have good test scores. Once we remove that, how do we continue to distinguish our students?
So, darn good question. And so, first of all, we don't, just because UCs and Cal State ultimately will not be looking at SATs, doesn't mean every university and college in the country is going to abandon SATs.
Thank you for saying. I can't agree with you more. And again, I know I keep interrupting you, but the number of private schools, the number of out-of-state schools. I mean, you have the Oregon schools, Colorado, Washington. I mean, Boise's incredibly popular. Indiana's incredibly popular. All of the Chapman and Claremont McKenna, like all of these schools, as of now, have no plans to eliminate these tests. So for some
because
people,
they're a good indicator.
Yes, they're the best indicator.
What an odd concept.
They are the best. And the UCs admitted, I think it was in February, they hired a task force, studied this extensively. They admitted that the SAT and ACT were the greatest indicator of first-year success for college students. That was out of essays, out of GPA, out of everything. Your test score had the greatest probability of predicting success.
So they're doing it for political reasons, not because it makes sense.
Yes, well,
that's what it comes down to.
In the absence, again, in the gap of understanding, somebody says, "Hey, it's discriminatory, it's racism." You have to come up with another answer or eliminate it.
Right.
So again, I'm sorry
because nobody's willing to look in on themselves about what have I done as an educator, what have I done as a superintendent, what have I done as a school board to perpetuate a lower level of acceptance going to colleges. What have I done to make sure that, or what have I not done that have resulted in minority kids performing at a lower level, and in many cases an abysmal lower level, that will ensure. The reality is you don't have to go to college to get into the middle class, to raise up socioeconomically. College is one path, but there are others as well. Bottom line is, if you don't have a quality education, if you haven't learned the basics, nothing is ever guaranteed 100%. But statistically, the odds are you will remain, if you started low socioeconomically, you will remain low socioeconomically unless you've received a quality education that will allow you to have as many of those doors that I talked about earlier open to you, that you can walk through to start your life and your progression into, if you're a low-income person, into the middle class or higher. The bottom line is, we as educators, we as school districts, don't focus enough on all those doors being open. And we make allowances and acceptance for kids. I have heard it over and over and over again from people in this valley who are minorities that said when they met with their counselors, wherever school they were going to, whatever district they were in when they were growing up, they would get told, well, college really isn't for you. I was just talking to an African-American executive here in the Valley, and he told me, very blatant, and I know the school he went to, very blatant, is basically, well, really, you really shouldn't be going to college.
That's what my dad was told in high school too, that he should become a landscaper.
So
in all seriousness,
that kind of stuff. I'm not normally a violent person, when I hear those kinds of stories, I want to rip somebody's head off. Inappropriate in so many levels, but it isn't maybe as blatant as it was in those days, but it is still there. An acceptance of mediocrity is an acceptance of failure. And what we have to do as educators statewide is not say, well, they're from a crime-ridden, gang-ridden area, and therefore we can't accept the same level. And you may not even say that publicly. You may not say that privately as you're having your staff meetings at a school. But instinctively, you may be thinking that. That systemic view that because of the underprivileged environment you're coming from, we can't expect the same from you as that white kid or that Asian kid who comes from a high socioeconomic background.
Right.
And I say, hell no, that's wrong. Every kid deserves the same level of preparation, regardless of where they're coming from. It's the only way we're going to solve the systemic socioeconomic problems of the growing poverty that we have in this state and in this country. You do it through education. Doesn't mean you have to go to college. You try to go to a 4-year apprenticeship program, as an example, as a machinist. You know the math you have to do as a machinist?
Yes. I have a good friend who's actually, he was applying for the, it was like an elevator repair union. And he got a hold of me. He said, hey, look, I need help with algebra. He was a painting contractor. He said, you know, this algebra is for the birds, man. Like, I can't understand any of it. And it was really clear that he was a bright guy, because I said, no, look, you understand algebra. You just don't understand what's on the page. I said, look, you buy two paint cans and a brush, and it's $105, and the brush was $5. How much are the paint cans? He's like, oh, it's $50 gallon of paint. I said, right, that's the same as 2x plus 5.
Right.
And he was like, oh. So
right.
If you change the way, you just change the way somebody understood the problem, it was an easier way to teach them and help them see it. So again, what do we do? How do we
my belief, and again, as much as I'd like to be an omnipotent, all-powerful God in the state of California, could I just wave my magic wand? I only have one voice among 5 on one school board in one district. So what are we going to do in San Ramon Valley? First of all, we continue to offer the SATs, the pre-SATs.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we've offered it to sophomore and juniors. In the past, the PSATs are a solid statistical indicator of higher test scores when you take the SATs. In other words, practice tests,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So you do more. Common sense says if you practice more, you'll get a higher test score. So we offered the PSATs. We did it. We've offered for free. People want to donate, they can, but we've offered it for free in the past. We're going to be having a discussion about that, I believe, at tonight's board meeting, where I'm going to be pushing to continue to offer it for sophomores and juniors. There is some discussion about only offering it to juniors. I would like to offer it to sophomores and continue to do that, because I think it's the right thing. It's the right thing to do. So don't abandon the concept of SATs. Don't ignore it. Continue our efforts to ensure that people continue to get pretty astonishing SAT scores when you compare us to other districts. That's issue number 1. Issue number 2, knowing that SATs, at least in the public universities in California, are going to be diminished, how do we have our kids stand out? It's like we invented the PLIs for this, the personal learning initiatives, because what you're going to be able to do now is show those admissions counselors and committees that you're able to take different coursework, college level work, more APs than everybody else, or not APs, but taking college level courses in college, at college institutions. And so you're a known commodity, you're a proven commodity, that you are able. They only have so many slots available. And every year, colleges admit kids who aren't ready, they aren't prepared, they fail, they drop out. And so each one of those failures is precious, because somebody who might not have failed, might not have dropped out, didn't get admitted. So it's somewhat of nothing's ever guaranteed in life. Nothing's guaranteed in admissions. The person who looks like, they got 4.0 at such and such a high school, they go to Cal, they go to UCLA, whatever, and they fail miserably because now they were the brightest at their high school. They were the best. They were the most high achieving. And now they're surrounded by thousands of other kids who were equally high achieving, or maybe even more high achieving than they were.
How dare you?
How dare I know?
My child is the best.
Is it? Yeah, right. So the bottom line, my daughter did a phenomenal job. What she said about Cal was she had to work her behind off to get an A, because all the other kids were equally bright and equally determined to get that A. And God help you if you're one of those professors who graded on the curve, right?
That's a gnarly situation.
An A everywhere else might be a B for you.
Right.
And, if you get a B, it's not good if you're trying to get into grad school, law school, med school, whatever. So it's a constant battle. So my daughter was imminently prepared for Cal, and she had to work her behind off. So if you want to get into one of the top tier universities, and the SATs aren't going to be looked at, if you're a known commodity because you've taken college level work, then you have a better chance of being in the yes pile. So that's how we, in my opinion, how we stand out from the competition, if you will. The other thing I'd be interested in exploring is providing a senior project for our seniors that did something from a social perspective, helping kids. You could do a reading project to help underperforming kids read. You could become a tutor at a sister school in a district that doesn't have high achieving kids in schools. What are you going to do to help? So a senior project that gives back, if you will, because we are so incredibly lucky to live in the San Ramon Valley. We have, yes, we're not perfect by a long shot, but we're a pretty darn good school district compared to many others. We have some of the best cities. Danville's got the lowest crime rate. I mean, there's all these pluses about living in the San Ramon Valley. So I'm very big about giving back. That's why I've been on the board for as long as I have. I wanted to give back to my fellow citizens. I wanted to give back to the kids. So what are you going to do as a senior project to give back? That will not only, I think, help you identify with the less fortunate, but it will also help you understand. It will also, that's something that looks good on the resume, if you will.
Yes, 100%.
For college, right?
100%.
So how do we make that? So how do we replace it? So those are some things that I'm thinking about. Don't get rid of the SATs. Don't diminish them. I think they're important. We continue to offer them, and we continue to help support them. We emphasize the personal learning initiatives and encourage kids to look at other alternatives that will enhance their ability to get into the college they want to get into. And then we offer senior project. I think those are the things that will help us offset what I think would, if we don't do anything, we just maintain the status quo, I think will put our kids at a disadvantage compared to the current situation.
Right. And one thing that I don't think a lot of people realize, even say you have a student who's a senior at San Ramon and she wants to go to Berkeley. Mm-hmm. Even though she's going to Berkeley, it doesn't mean she may not have to take the SAT, because one of the big things that people don't realize is, say she's a water polo player, okay? The NCAA has not made any indication that they intend to eliminate the SAT requirement for eligibility.
Right.
That's an absolute truth. You have all kinds of different scholarships that are going to be requiring the SAT or ACT. So recognizing that although some of the public universities may be eliminating the requirement for admissions, does not mean the school should abandon the success they've had.
Exactly. So your problem, sir, is you're thinking about all the details. You would not make a good politician. You see, the politicians only think about one thing, right? We'll worry about the detail. The devil's in the detail. I'll worry about that later. They make these sweeping announcements and changes without understanding the consequences of their decisions. So,
well, all of the prep I do with students is all about details. So some parents ask me, okay, well, what do you do to help students eliminate mistakes? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, that's like a 27-part question, because you have aspects of the test that the student may not know. You have aspects of the material, not just the test being this big question mark. You have aspects of the material that they may know and they're just really bad at executing on. You have aspects of the material that they've forgotten. So there are all kinds of reasons. There are like 24 reasons, easy reasons why people make mistakes. but it's the details, right? I mean, people call me all the time and say, can't you just teach the strategies of the test or teach the test? Well, that's a complex issue. So right. Here's, if I may pivot, there's one of the biggest questions that people have asked when I said, hey, I'm going to speak with Greg, president of the Board of Education, what questions might you want answered? And one of the biggest questions was, hey, look, everybody knows funding is an issue. Mm-hmm. And it seems that the board voted unanimously to give the exiting superintendent and the executives this pay raise in March. Why did they do that? Right? What was the motivation? What was the thought? And was it just that it's tradition, or was it something that was agreed on previously? What was the push there?
The push was believing that we are, let me use an analogy, we're all in a lifeboat together, and we believe, and have for a very long time, at least as long as I've been on the board, that we treat everybody the same. So if money is tight that year and you think you want a 10% raise, 20% raise, I mean, you ought to see some of the proposals we get sometimes.
Proposals from who?
The unions.
You know, oh, okay. Teachers' unions.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah, well, all the unions.
Okay.
But bottom line is, the job of unions is to take as many of the chips on the table that's on your side of the table and put it on their side of the table. That's their job. I was a union rep. I did it for 6 years. I negotiated hundreds of contracts for the union when I was on union side before I went into a district administration. So I get the role. I understand it. And so we go through the negotiations process. We end up with an agreed upon amount that we're going to provide, and then we believe that everybody should get treated the same. So whether you're a bus driver, a school secretary, a counselor, a nurse, a 5th grade teacher, a high school math instructor, it doesn't matter. Your principal, you should all be getting the same amount because we're all in the same lifeboat. We're all here for the kids, and we're all rowing as hard as we can. And sometimes there are storms. You know, the waves are coming over the keel of the boat, and we're having to bail. Well, we're all bailing together. At least I hope we are, as a team. If we treat one team member differently in that boat and say, you know, you're not as valuable as these other people, and so you're not going to get the same kind of compensation increase that we gave everybody else. You're not as important. And we throw them over the boat. Is that team rowing effort going to be impacted? I would argue it would be. So that's issue number one. It's treating everybody. It's an equity issue, treating everybody the same.
So again, what you're saying is because the teachers union had negotiated a pay increase,
right,
then you guys offer that pay increase across the board to everyone.
Well, we negotiate with 3 different unions.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, but generally we try to also keep the compensations the same for everybody. I mean, some union may try to just decide they want to take some of their compensation and put over here somewhere else. But the bottom line is the percentage amount that's provided, we try to make it similar for everybody. So,
Gotcha.
So the teachers union doesn't negotiate for everybody else. They negotiate for themselves. The classified, we have 2 different classified unions, CSEA and SEIU, and they negotiate for their white collar, generically speaking, and blue collar. So they negotiate for themselves. But generally, we try to provide an amount, compensation-wise, that's similar. So compensation is just stuff that's on the schedule.
Sure.
It's also things that we do on benefits on health and welfare, as an example, and additional benefits for retirees. There's all kinds of things that go into that mix. But generally, we try to treat everybody the same. Management are unrepresented. They don't have a union. So in effect, we are their union, if you will, the board. And so we try to treat, again, everybody the same. If we throw one of the members rowing through this storm off the boat, we're not going to be as effective as a team. So that's issue number 1, treating everybody the same, equity. Number 2, if you, and I've worked in districts, had a habit of doing this, if you treat managers less than everybody else, and you do that over and over and over again, several things happen. Number one, they look at the other employee groups and go, well, every year they get more than we get. They got a raise last year and we didn't, or we only got half what they got. What's the difference? Oh, they belong to a union. So we have state districts in the state of California where the principals, as an example, are represented by the Teamsters. All right? I'm not sure that, well, that's telling you something, I think, about how management felt that the employer, the school board, was viewing them, the value of them. If you have to get an outside labor organization to try to ensure that you get treated fairly, there's something wrong with you as the employer. That's the bottom line. So I've always said if we treat management less than everybody else, in nature, for every action there's a reaction. And here's the reaction. They'll just join a union, which they would have every right to do. In California, only executives are excluded from belonging to a union. You can't belong to the same bargaining unit as, like a principal can't belong to the same union that represents teachers, but they could have a separate union. So for every action, there's a reaction. Our employees would simply do what so many other large school districts have done, is they form a bargaining unit and get represented. Now we have to have a collective bargaining process for them. So that would be issue one reaction. The second reaction is, when you're competing in the labor market for the best and the brightest, do you want a mediocre principal at San Ramon Valley High? As an example, our principal just left for a promotion in another district. So when we ultimately recruit, do you want the best that the labor market can offer, or are you willing to accept somebody less qualified, mediocre? Because if we're not near the top of the labor market, we'll certainly get people to apply. One thing I learned in HR, 30 plus years in human resources in schools, is that you'll always get somebody to apply. Are they somebody you want to run your school? Do you want that math teacher at a high school that was in the bottom of their class, and we only got 3 apps and he was breathing, so we've got to hire him, because you're at the bottom of the labor market. You want to hire the best and the brightest, not just in the classroom. How about the guy managing those 100 plus classrooms at a high school, as an example? Are you willing to accept a mediocre administrator? I'd argue no. So quality, you usually have to buy quality. I don't have a problem with that. We're number one when you look at total salaries and compensation. We're number one or number two, depending on which factor you look at, in the Bay Area among our teachers. We're not number one on salary schedule, because many districts don't provide. So is it like Pleasanton pays us a couple, $3,000 more than we get on the salary schedule, but then you have to pay for every single dollar of your health benefit.
Right. I think Mount Diablo did that when I was just graduating as well.
And I argued at the time. I talked to their assistant superintendent. He called me and asked me my opinion. I was a college vice chancellor at the time, and he asked my opinion. I said, don't do it. It's a mistake. Don't do it. Don't do it. You'll be sorry. You will not be competitive in the labor market. You're going to help the people that are about to retire, because that money all went on the salary schedule that would have gone towards health and welfare benefits. But you will be sorry in the long run. And boy, sadly, I was right. It was a huge mistake on their part. So we don't do that. So we take that money that could go on the schedule, and we devote it towards health and welfare. So when you take that, and it's 25,000 plus, it's going to go up again next year. So it'll be approaching 30. So when you have our salaries and our health benefits, when you combine those two, we're top 10% in the state of California from our teachers, and we're number one or number two, depending on which factor you look at, in the Bay Area. So I'd say we're highly competitive. We did that on purpose. I'd argue you have to be equally highly competitive among your administrators. So let's talk about the actual raise that we gave. We did it because of that concept, not because, we've always done it. No, it's because of philosophical belief that we need to treat everybody equally. We're all in this together. We're all part of the same team. If we begin to treat people differently, the team begins to break down. So that's issue one. We want to stay competitive. We're not competitive if we start to give lower raises to or no raises to administrators. And ultimately, we want to be, how do I explain this? There was a movement afoot that got started. I saw the screenshots.
I love that so much information comes through in screenshots.
It isn't amazing.
You just get a picture, you're like, what the hell am I even looking at? And they're like emojis and all this.
Right.
And if you sift through it all, you
Right,
see this message, you're like, oh, God.
So there were members of, so as I said to the, so I saw them, and they were things being egged on and started by members of the teachers union, the executive board. And I called the president and said, hello, what's going on here? Well, what are you talking about? Well, members of your executive board are the union is. Oh, no, it's not. They weren't authorized to do it. But okay, but
they weren't authorized to start this kind of conversation.
Right. They weren't authorized to do it. What they were trying to do was build up a movement to try and create a problem so the managers wouldn't get their raises. And I said, so what's the rationale? What's the reason? Well, we're just traumatized. We're just traumatized by the $8 million that the district has to cut out of its budget to give raises in 1920. I said, so how come you weren't traumatized when you got your raise? Why are you suddenly traumatized now? Because somebody else, you don't want that other group to get it. That's what it comes down to. So we had our blue-collar workers, represented by SEIU, and our managers both were given them. We took an action at that same board meeting. So that union had gotten their raise, and they suddenly, as I said to her, said, you suddenly found religion. You suddenly found religion about this. I said, now, we managed to do it. We would not have offered you not 1 cent more than we could ultimately through judicious budget cuts we could afford. You wanted more, if you recall, but we didn't give it to you because we couldn't afford it. We gave you exactly what we could afford, not 1 cent more, but also, to be fair, not 1 cent less. And the county had told us we also couldn't give any more. So
you effectively had a teachers union that said, hey, look, we're freaked out about this massive deficit we have, this $8 million deficit. And because of that, we're shocked that you guys are giving the executives this pay raise.
The same amount you gave us. How dare you give it to anybody else? Right. And I just find that incredibly disingenuous. So then some of the other screenshots that I saw, well, we gave a 200% increase to our managers. I love the one where the board members gave themselves big fat raises. That was also out there. I don't know if you saw any of those or heard about that. The school board gave themselves big raises. The last time we gave ourselves a raise was 14 years ago, and we get now the last 14 years we get $400 a month. That's a stipend.
Wait, $400 all-in compensation for being on the Board of Education.
Right, for the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours we spend a year giving back. We do it as volunteers. So we get $400. That's to cover, the inevitable. You got to go to this football game, and I want to go and see. I want to support the kids putting on this play, and all the various things you go to. You go to PTA luncheons and this event here and this event there. So you add all that up, and obviously a large portion of that money goes back anyway.
I think if I were on the Board of Education, I would spend $400 a month in coffee, just getting myself jacked up. Right. So you guys are effectively, I don't mean to insult you, but you're effectively a volunteer board. Your total compensation is under $5,000 a year for everything that you do.
Yeah, it is, and the law allows us to give, I believe, at least 2.5 times what we get. But we didn't do it. None of us got on this board because of the
compensation.
The compensation, the massive amount of no, we did. But people, those kinds of outright lies were out there. We gave ourselves a big raise. We did not give ourselves a big raise, and then talked about we pay our superintendent. What was the number? We pay our superintendent.
I think I've heard $450,000 all in.
With the new superintendent, he gets the same package that the teachers get, which is basically the same health and welfare package. And then he's got the pension costs same. He's in the same retirement system that the teachers are in. So he gets thousands less than the prior superintendent, about $17,000 a year less than our prior superintendent. He also gets less than the superintendent in a neighboring district. I won't mention which one, but a neighboring district within 20, 25-minute commute that's a third our size. He gets substantial thousands less. So we're not number one in the labor market by any stretch for our superintendent. We are a high-achieving district. We're a large district. We're the largest district in Contra Costa County. He is the highest paid in Contra Costa County, but he isn't the highest paid in the Bay Area by a long shot. There's a district on the peninsula, San Benito Peninsula, that pays, I believe it's on the peninsula, it could be down in the Silicon Valley directly, that pays twice what our superintendent gets for a much smaller operation. So, no, bottom line is, are we in the top 10% for superintendents in the state? Absolutely. Just as we are with teachers, just as we are with our classified employees. Again, as an employer, as a board, we believe you don't attract the best by being at the bottom of the labor market. You attract the best by being near the top.
Right. And thank you for explaining that, because I think when I saw a screenshot, somebody sent it to me. They're like, he makes, X amount of dollars. And initially you look at it and you say, well, that's a lot of money. What are we really doing here? But to your point, whatever somebody thinks on the outside, right, about how much somebody should make or how much somebody shouldn't make, the bottom line is you have to offer a competitive option if you want to get the best people. And that's the bottom line. So we could say, hey, look, you and I could agree in some alternate universe, we could agree that the superintendent should work for free. And say, wouldn't that be wonderful?
It's an honor to work in this district.
It's an honor to take care of these people. And in an alternate universe, that would be a viable option. But in this universe, getting a superintendent to work for free would be impossible. And so what you're effectively saying is, look, he gets a compensation package that's analogous percentage-wise with what our teachers get. We're top 10%. He's top 10%. The gripe that the teachers union had with the raise that he got, or excuse me, the executives got that the board agreed to, is the exact same percentage-wise as the raise the teachers got. Right. Everybody got the raise.
Everybody got treated equally, right down to the penny. One of the things that I saw in screenshots, again, was we pay our superintendent 10 times. I think I saw one that said 20 times, but most of them I saw were 10 times more than what we pay our teachers. So our teachers are incredibly valuable. They're the ones that are providing education in the classroom every day. So have always been a strong supporter of teachers. I have hired thousands in my career in running HR. I have believed very strongly that you have to be competitive. That's why we're second from the bottom in revenue to support this district, but we're in the number one or number two in the Bay Area and in the top 10% statewide in teacher compensation. Does that mean we don't care about teachers? No, absolutely we do. I mean, obviously. I mean, look at it. So let's talk about that. Do we pay our superintendent 10 times more than our rank and file teachers? Our average teacher with salary and benefits, average, not our starting, our average teacher makes $122,000 a year.
I'm sorry, your average teacher makes
$122,000 a year. Yeah, that's average. So we got some that make less, obviously. Do the math. Obviously, you know math. So you got a bunch that are making less. You got a bunch that are making more. But the average, that's salary and benefits, is $122,000. Our top salary, benefited with all benefits and everything, our top teacher, if they've taken some certain stipends, they're like getting close to $160 a year. So we pay our superintendent about double what we pay our highest paid teacher. So I think most people would think, well, that's fair. Let's see here. I'm giving somebody, if you're been with us enough that you're at the top step and all that, I'm paying somebody $150,000, $160,000 to teach in a classroom and do a great job, heck of a job, and I'm going to pay my superintendent double that. Now, he's got 4,000 employees to worry about. That teacher has 24, 28, whatever kids to worry about if it's an elementary school. One classroom versus the thousands that the superintendent is ultimately, as the CEO, is responsible for. Are we paying him thousands more than that teacher? No. We pay him a little more than double our teacher. More than if the average, yes, the average he makes around 2.5 times about roughly what an average teacher makes. But is that 10 times? Is that 20 times? No. So the lies that were out there that people believe, sadly, people see it on social media, and it must be true. It must be true. The reality is it's not. So the other thing is, why did we give our superintendent a step increase last year? So he was entitled to it because all of our employees, whether you were a teacher or a non-teacher, a bus driver, a custodian, a school secretary, an accountant, whatever, whether you're a principal, everybody in this district is on a salary schedule. That you start at step 1, you go to step 2, you start at step 3, based on years of service, or in some cases based upon years of or additional units you've taken past your bachelor's degree. So like for teachers, so you take post college level work, you can move across the schedule. So you move across and down. It's called step and column. And so there are scores of different ways you can go up and down. But the bottom line is, when you're at the end, you're the furthest you can get, and years of service, furthest you can get in terms of postgraduate bachelor's units. That's how you get to that 150 to 160 again, based on whether you have certain stipends or not. So the bottom line is, we treat our executives the same way. Our principals have a step. Our assistant superintendents have steps. Our superintendent has a step. So it isn't a one-step schedule. So we did that on purpose, just as we do with all the other. We want you to stick around. We've invested in you as an employee. We now make it advantageous for you to stick around by knowing, hey, if you stick around another year, oh, look, you're going to be due for a step increase. So the vast majority of employers do that, both in the public and the private sector. In the private sector, they don't publicize their steps because very often it's confidential, but they all have them. In the public sector, it's posted on our website. You can go see what a teacher makes. We can see what a bus driver makes, what a custodian makes, what a principal makes. It's all on our schedules, public. So our superintendent is no different. So at the start of the 1920 school year, so July 1 of 2019, which seems so far back.
It's like a lifetime ago.
I know. Can we just forget 2020? So July 1, 2019, he got a step increase because he was rated by the board as having done an exemplary job. He didn't just do an average job. He did above expectations job. PLI is a good example. I mean, he implemented some phenomenal changes in this district that people are raving about. He was a great superintendent. So he was due for a step increase. He got it. Some people went bananas about that he got a step increase. He got it because just as you got your step increase that year, teacher or classified employee or principal, so did the superintendent. Our assistant superintendent of our CBO, our chief business officer, assistant super business, he was due for a step increase this year, July 1 of 2020. And we gave that to him as well. We got some flack about giving him a raise. He, by the way, has saved us scores of millions of dollars in the way he's managed our budget and the way he's refinanced. We're doing a thing tonight. He's come up with a real innovative way to save upwards of $35 million for the taxpayers on how we refinance our bonds that we have, paying for all the facilities that we've done over the last 20 years. Refinancing those and saving up to $35 million. Get different options we're going to be looking at tonight. No districts don't do that. Ours does because we have literally the best CBO in the state of California. But he was due for a step increase July 1. Did he get it? We found that they did an excellent job. So yes, he got a step increase. And we keep him around.
Keep him around to keep saving those millions.
Thank you. Hello. So superintendent, same thing. So Rick Schmidt he had announced his retirement. Yes. His contract says that he gets the same raise that the management unit, the management group gets, the unrepresented group gets. He gets the same raise everybody else gets. And so he was due it. We gave it to him.
That again, that does not seem outlandish or fat cattish
or it wasn't,
or kind of a backdoor deal.
And it isn't. We didn't give it to him as a bonus. We're giving him a bonus as he leaves. I saw those. He's leaving the district. As he exits, we're giving this big fat bonus. One, it wasn't that big fat. It wasn't a huge bonus. Just ask the unions. We didn't give them everything they wanted by a long shot. So it was a fairly small raise that we gave in 1920. So it wasn't a bonus exit. We did it because he was contractually had a right to the raise for 1920. The fact that it took us till March and April to finish the raises for negotiations with the unions wasn't his fault.
So let me just be clear on this point. He was supposed to get it in July, and because of negotiations with the union, his pay his pay increase got delayed. So when people are saying, "Hey, he got this retroactive pay increase," it only became retroactive because the negotiations with the union were so prolonged that it wasn't until March-ish when everything was ratified.
And he got the same retroactive effect that the teachers got.
Greg, there seems to be such a disconnect between the teachers' union and the executives and the Board of Education, because I've spoken with a lot of the teachers, and one in particular had been a teacher and then she stepped away. She had other family obligations, and then she came back to teaching and said, look, when I was initially teaching, there was not this culture of animosity between the executives and the Board of Education and the teachers union. But when I came back, I felt like there was this wedge.
Right.
And there's been a lot of talk about other people that are running for the seat and how they have connections with the teachers and they're endorsed by the teachers union. What do you think's fueling that disconnect? Or do you disagree? Do you think it's more of a social media, like we were talking about, like all of a sudden people start saying, well, what do you think about the wedge that's been driven in between? It's like, oh, there's a wedge. Oh, we're not on the same team anymore. Oh, okay. That kind of perpetual motion.
I think it's a philosophy. When I was an executive in schools or in college systems, what I learned a long time, and labor relations was one of the functions that reported to me. So I've negotiated contracts for up to 6,000 employees at once with unions, various unions. One I learned a long time ago is it's very heavily driven by personality and attitude. So I was in one district where the president of the teachers union got up and said, I was basically the best thing since sliced bread. I sat to the right hand of God. I could do no wrong. I was a saint. Thank God we hired you. Right? He no longer is president. New president comes in, and I've gone from being a saint to now I am the spawn of Satan. I didn't change at all. But the personality on the other side of the table had changed. So there is this belief, and having been a labor rep, I represented thousands of school employees in scores of school districts when I was a labor rep, and I represented teachers and classified employees and counselors and so forth. So the issue for me always was, my philosophy when I negotiated for the union was, it's always better to use honey than vinegar. So if you tick off the people that have all those chips on their side of the table, the odds of you getting some of those chips get diminished. So you want to be you don't want to kowtow, you don't want to bow down, you don't want to kiss their feet. At the same time, you expect them to give you respect, and you want to give them respect back. And when you come with that attitude of, we're in this together, how can we work it out? It's amazing the things that you can do. We've had a history in this district from the mid-90s on until recently of having this, we're in this together, let's work it out together. And it hasn't, it's changed. And I'm not going to speculate why. The same, you basically have, for all intents and purposes, not the same board over the last 20 years in terms of attitude. We're very pro-union. We're very pro-employee. We're also very pro-student. And kids come first. The role of a union, of the teachers' union, isn't to do what's best for kids. The role of a teachers' union is to do what's best for their members. Kids, as Al Shanker was the first president of American Federation of Teachers, famously once said, it was quoted as having said, I'll care about students when they start paying dues. And I'm not saying every teachers union believes that, because I find that a really abhorrent statement. But I also recognize and fully support the role of a teachers union, because I represented teachers. I get it. The role of a teachers union isn't to run the district. The role of a teachers union is to get as many of those chips from your side of the table, management side of the table, onto their side. And I get that. That's their job. And I support them wholeheartedly to try to do that with reason.
Good faith.
Good faith and within reason. In other words, I would always tell people when I walk into a district as their new assistant superintendent, vice chancellor, whatever role I was playing at that point, you have the best friend you ever had on cabinet, right here, right now. Or if you stab me in the back, if you lie, if you're disingenuous, you've got the worst enemy. The decision is yours. Most people accepted that, and we got along great. We did some marvelous things in many of my districts. I don't play that role in this district. I'm a board member, so that's what executive staff is for. They serve as the negotiators. We as a board give them direction. We tell them what their parameters are. So, as an example, at one point, the teachers union in this district had wanted $40 million. We didn't have $40 million. They wanted in raises and decreased in workload and all other kinds of. We didn't have $40 million. And so we ended up with a compromise. We also ended up with threats of strikes. When you strike in a school district, you're not striking against the employer, you're striking against the kids, because kids are the ones that are going to get hurt. We have always said we're going to provide the best raise that we can, the best compensation increase that we can, the best that we can in class sizes. But we're not a Palo Alto Unified, which gets 3 times what we get. We can't do what some other districts are, a 15-to-1 or a 16-to-1 class size, because they get literally hundreds of millions of more per year than we get. We have limitations. If you ignore, like the current leadership in the teachers union wanted us to do, if you wanted us to ignore the realities of the math, and we'd conned the county superintendent's office into agreeing to that, we would be bankrupt this year, literally taken over by the county and the state. Wouldn't have the money. And so part of the negotiations process is a give and take, but I would argue it needs to be a fair, fact-based give and take that looks at the math, because ultimately a lot of what we're talking about is money. You want to have more. You want to have fewer kids in at the high school level. Great, fewer kids in a class. Okay, how much is that going to cost? It's not funny money. It costs money to say we're going to need to add 40 more teachers because we've reduced the number of the class size in language arts. Pick a number. Great. Would I want to do that? Absolutely. Can I do it financially without bankrupting the district? And that's the issue. And that's the give and take that you have between, because if management is crazy enough to say, all these chips that I have on my side of the table, here, they're all yours. What do you do when a crisis hits? So you have no reserves, you have no money, and I know strange things happen. I know a pandemic come to mind.
The world is burning outside.
What are you going to do? So you got to have reserves. You got to have reserves. And I heard from the teachers union over and over again, well, reserves need to be spent now. Reserves need to be spent now. Well, reserves are intended for a purpose. They're reserved for not necessarily what is, but what if. And so you have to have enough reserves to cover. So that tension between how many of the chips does management get to retain and how many chips does the union get is a constant thing. The question is, do we do it from a position of respect? Do we do it from a position of we're all in this together and we don't want to hurt the kids, we don't want to hurt the district, we don't want to put you in financial peril? And you look at districts that are in financial peril, some of them very close to us right now. They agreed to give the union more chips, using that analogy, than they could afford. And the end result is kids are suffering. People are going to get laid off. Kids are not going to have the same options that they had before. The county may take them over. I predict Sac City, as an example, will probably be taken over this year. I think there are a couple of districts in this county that are in serious trouble that may very well be taken over. In Alameda County, you've got Oakland that their stuff is in the news. It seems like every week about they're on the financial edge. Ultimately, you cannot negotiate in an information vacuum. So because we say to the unions, either all of them, sometimes we have to say no, but we're not doing it because we're evil. We're not doing it because we want to stick it to those hardworking employees. We're doing it because the available funds don't allow us to honor their ask that they want from us. We simply can't do it. And they talk about, one of the things I heard about our massive number of administrators in this district. You probably saw some of those screenshots, right? We have the lowest percentage of administrators of any district in Northern California, and we have one of the lowest in the state of California. We are not overstaffed among administrators, and I take pride in that.
As you should. It's just
right.
a drain.
Thank you. Well, managers perform an absolutely important task.
I'm not saying that. Right. Like, you just don't need 5 of them when the job really calls for 2.
For 2, exactly. So one of the things we've been doing was also, even though prior to this we were already one of the lowest in terms of the percentage of administrators, over the last 2 years we've eliminated 22 additional administrative positions through attrition, through people leaving voluntarily, involuntarily, whatever. People have left. We're down to 22 fewer administrators. So when I don't think some people in the unions would want us, they won't be happy until there is no principal at a site. They'll have a committee running the school. That usually doesn't work out. I use communist Russia and how those collective farms work out.
I was literally talking to a student last night about, we were talking about a professor in Canada, and the student was saying, well, I don't really like him because he has all these conversations with different people, but he doesn't talk to Marxists. I was like, talk to Marxists? What? He said, well, if your position is so superior, why don't you talk to somebody who's like a socialist or who is a Marxist and have it out with them and really figure out if their way's better? We're like, man, you're not obligated to talk to crazy people. And I said, look, you like your hat? You like owning that hat? Why don't you keep that hat then, and let's keep the Marxists at bay? I appreciate where he's coming from, because the student really is trying to vet for himself the philosophies in life and the best guiding principles, and that's what he should be doing.
Part of what education is all about.
Right. So we ended up going down this rabbit hole for 5 or 10 minutes about Marxism, and again, it was a bananas conversation. But yes, I brought up the exact same stuff.
Well, I'm a data guy. I always have been a data guy. One district called me when I was in higher ed. It was a number of college systems. I was called the data vice chancellor because somebody wanted to do something, and I said, okay, what do the facts say? What's the data? Give me something that's going to support your position, and so data. So I'm driven by that, and math is data, and so yes, would I love to have a 15-to-1 class size? Would I love to ensure that we had double the number of special ed teachers that we have now to help our most needy, our most at-risk kids? God, yes, in a heartbeat. But ultimately, if the data doesn't support the resources to provide it, if I agree to it, it's a very short-term agreement and a very short-term promise, because when the state comes in and takes us over, they're going to lay a whole bunch of people off. As occurred, if you recall, there was a settlement a number of years ago. There was a strike and then a settlement in Oakland years ago, and they gave a raise that they couldn't afford. Everybody said, you can't afford it. They gave it anyway. 2 years later, the state took them over and then hundreds and hundreds of teachers got laid off.
Right.
So it was you don't want to make a promise that you cannot keep long term. So could we have given the raises that our teachers union were demanding from us in the last couple of years, and the other changes that they wanted? The answer is yes, we absolutely could have done it for a very, very short period of time, and then the consequences would have hit.
Right.
And nobody would have liked the consequences. And as much as we would have been vetted and told how wonderful we were as a school board to have put your teachers first and done all these wonderful things to reduce class size, we would have been equally vilified at the point at which those same teachers got laid off, because we simply didn't have the funds to support it any longer.
Right.
And I think that's a horrible thing to do to teachers. It's a horrible thing to do to kids. It's horrible. So what you do is, absent a radical change in the way the state is funding us, I don't see that happening, we're going to be stuck probably at the bottom of the financial pool of available money, and we have to live with that. And what we've been doing, what I've been pushing for as a board member, since LCFF went into place, I think the start of our 7th year with LCFF, is I could see where it was going to lead us. I knew we were going to go from being not quite at the average, we were about $1,000 under the average. I knew we would drop. We could see it, the inevitable drop as we got less and less. Other districts would get $700-800 increase for their per kid. We would get $200 or $300. All right, and you keep doing that year after year after year. Pretty soon, hello, you're where we are, second from the bottom.
Right.
And I saw that coming. And so what we've been doing, what I've been pushing for, strong advocate, sometimes management would be mad at me because I was pushing, we got to rethink, we got to do it more. Trying to find ways to rethink how we're doing business so that we could free up the necessary ongoing resources to continue to stay competitive in the labor market with our teachers and our administrators and our classified employees. Because ultimately, I'm sorry you don't like it. People don't like it, but the reality is the labor market drives your pool of candidates. And when you're at the bottom of the labor market, you will always get people to apply. I was always amazed at sometimes the quality of the people that would apply. I'd say, my God, why did they even think they would have a chance as you screening them out? But I had the luxury of working in districts where I didn't have to worry about accepting somebody who was, they're breathing, they're alive. We put a mirror to their nose. Let's put them in the pool. No, right? I never had to face that. But there are districts in this state that have to worry about that because they're at the bottom of the market. We're not, but we're going to have this problem now because at some point the easy fixes are done. The low-hanging fruit, if you will, is done. The rethinking of how you get from A to B is done. You cannot pull any more rabbits out of the hat financially to free up ongoing revenue. We're about there. Pandemic has pushed us closer to that end game than I was hoping. I was hoping we were going to have a couple more years. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. So there's where we're stuck. And we can get through it if we're working collaboratively together. But if the union currently, the teachers union currently views us as the enemy, that's the mentality of the current leadership, and that's unfortunate because we're not the enemy. We can do so much working together versus working apart. We can do so much more for kids if we're looking at things mutually together with the same view of doing what's best for kids, as opposed to threatening strikes, which for the last 2 years we were threatened with. If we didn't give them what they wanted, they would strike. You're going to hurt kids. And they did a masterful job of getting the public to think that we were somehow skinflints and stingy and not doing the right thing and doing what's best for kids. We absolutely were. We were ensuring that this state wasn't going to take this district over. When they take you over, by the way, what happens is the school board becomes, you don't get unseated, you just have no power. Okay? You become a figurehead, and the administrator appointed by the state and the county basically runs the show. They make all the decisions. And I would argue 5 locally elected volunteers from the community will make decisions that are better for their local community than some bureaucrat coming from Sacramento.
Man, that the book my son's on right now, to bring it back, my son who's 8 reading the 5th Harry Potter, it's when Umbridge, the state, or excuse me, the representative from the Department of Magic. Yes, she comes over and essentially takes over Hogwarts.
There you go.
All of the people are aghast. She's firing students. She's arguing with the headmaster, and she's just terrible, terrible person.
Ooh, I love that analogy. Well, I have some friends that are state administrators. I'm going to
share it with them.
I'm going to share that with them. Yes.
So one of the biggest questions.
But one other thing.
Please.
And I know this all firsthand, not because I ever had, when I was managing districts, not because I was ever taken over, but I have been on state teams that have gone in to analyze and determine whether a district needs to be taken over. Not a pleasant task, by the way.
I can't imagine.
I even had a CHP officer as my bodyguard. It was that hairy a situation. So I've gone in.
I can't imagine the parents in Danville.
Well, he was a really nice.
He
was a really nice guy. He wore Kevlar. I noticed. I was mentioned to him at lunch. I said, "I noticed you've got Kevlar and I don't." He said, "Yeah, I'll tell you to run fast." Yeah. So, but bottom line, I've been on state teams that have gone in to take over districts.
Yeah, it would be terrible. I can't. I mean, whatever displeasure you experience from not giving a certain raise or giving a raise to, say, the exiting superintendent, I couldn't imagine having the state of California, especially with the level of distrust the general population now has with the governing body in California. I can't imagine them coming in and saying, "Hey, we're going to do this better than you guys know how to do it because you're now insolvent and you haven't paid attention to the, let's say, numbers," as you're saying.
Ultimately, it is sadly a numbers game, and we don't have the same level of options that a district getting 3 times as much as we get has. I mean, I would love to be some of those districts within commute distance that get so much more than we do. The options available to them are phenomenal. We're not so lucky. And there's a long, a master's level course you can take and understanding why we are where we are in terms of the amount of money we get from the state of California. It all starts in the 70s prior to Prop 13. And then we're the legacy of what, this was a semi-rural district in the 70s. And with a semi-rural tax base, an amount per 100,000 of assessed that we would tax, which is generally in rural areas lower than they are in urban and suburban areas. So we weren't urban or suburban back in the 70s. And when everything got locked in with Prop 13, we had a very low per 100,000 assessed value number that we could charge, and that number basically hasn't changed. We're a high income, high wealth area with a lot of wonderfully expensive homes and properties, and we don't get the money to be independent from, like a Palo Alto is independent from the state in the sense they make so much from property taxes that they don't get any revenue, very little revenue from the state of California. They're basically fiscally independent. We are a ward of the state, San Juan Valley.
Palo Alto's like monopoly money. You have like a
so
1,200 square foot
more money
house.
than God.
Yeah, right.
It's amazing.
For $4 million.
Yeah.
So speaking of numbers, how do we increase our numbers? Because the enrollment in schools is down. And
It
this
is
is
going
one
down.
of the number one things that people cite as an ongoing problem that people saw coming.
Right.
And I haven't heard a lot of great solutions. Some people have talked about, hey, we need to do like a dual language immersion program at the elementary level that'll draw in more people. I mean,
I have a plan.
you have a plan.
I have a plan.
God bless it.
www.reelectmarvel.com. My God, I got that plug in. That's one of the things I list as one of the key challenges we need to face in the coming year, and that is the pandemic is one, and the decreasing enrollment is another, and then the financial condition of the state. The pandemic, the $54 billion that they're upside down. The deficit at the state level, which will come down to us. As a ward of the state, they get a cold, we're going to get pneumonia. Because, and again, with the funding formula being at where we are at the bottom,
it's going to be even worse for us specifically.
We're going to get massacred. So one of the things I'm looking at from an enrollment perspective is, you can't. We're not a communist, centrally managed dictatorship economy and society. We can't say, hey, you 5,000 families over there, you're now moving over to here. You could do that in dictatorships. We don't have that ability. So we're not going to force people to stick around. We don't have a big giant wall around the valley. So if you choose to move out, and how dare your kid graduate and go into college, and you don't have any more kids, what are you thinking? So there's nothing we can do about that.
That would be Marxism. They'd be kicked out.
That was a joke. So the bottom line is we have what we have. Enrollment is now declining for the first time in district history, by the way. So we are actually losing enrollment. In the last couple of years it started. It's got accentuated by pandemic. So what are some of the things we can do to turn it around?
If I may ask, what are the biggest drives for that? Because, again, I shared with you the story about how my family was at the public school recently, and because of what we view as problems in leadership in that local school, and then some of the teachers, we pulled out. But that was one of the questions. Right.
The first of all, I think you have to be.
My goodness.
I don't know where that's coming from. I have no idea.
Okay.
I'm hearing something in the background.
Is that? Did
It's
your
not
phone?
mine. It's not mine.
It's not. Did it get turned on?
No, I don't know what's going on. No. Anyway, sorry about that, guys.
No.
Anyway, so the issue, we can't force people to come. We can't force people to come. So what we can do.
One second, if I may.
Yeah.
You were saying we can't force people to come.
Yeah, we can't force people to come. What you can do is you can encourage them by offering alternatives that aren't available to neighboring districts. So one of my proposals is that we become a district of choice. There's a section in the education code which allows you to become a district of choice. So normally what happens is if you want somebody, if a parent wants to bring their child from outside the district, they live outside the boundaries of the district, they want to come in, you are the district that would be losing them can refuse to allow them to leave. All right? There are exceptions. One of them would be if the parent lives in the district, then they can have their child come here because that's where they work. They work here in the district somewhere. So there are exceptions. The other exception is the district of choice, which allows a district to, when they declare themselves a district of choice under the Ed Code, they are not required to get approval from another district that wants where the parent wants to come in. So in effect, you are now going to have the ability to market yourself to surrounding parents that don't live in the district to try to get and come into some of our empty classrooms.
So you could draw students from, say, Mount Diablo Unified.
Mount Diablo, from Pleasanton, from Dublin, whatever you want to do. Which doesn't make you really popular with your colleagues in those districts, of course, because every district gets their money from dollars. They get dollars for every child that's enrolled in the district, right? It's called ADA, average daily attendance. So you get that money. So if you've got 20 kids from Dublin that come to this district, we get the money. Dublin doesn't. So it doesn't make us overly popular with our colleagues in neighboring districts. But I didn't get elected by the citizens in Dublin or Pleasanton or Mount Diablo. I got elected by the citizens of the San Ramon Valley. And therefore, what I can do, if it's going to help us ensure that we don't take a 10 or 20 or $30 million hit on revenue because you have fewer kids, then I'm willing to do that. And frankly, we'll provide a quality education, a highly effective, highly quality education compared to many of the other districts around us. Looking at our proficiency scores, our test scores, our SATs, we'd be a heck of a deal for a lot of parents. As one parent told me once, I am getting a private school education at a public sector price. After his child had been there a year, and he'd come from the Silicon Valley, some very highly well-off school districts in the Silicon Valley on a per ADA basis, but he felt our schools were doing a better job in educating his kids. So bottom line is we make ourselves competitive by being a district of choice. We then offer really interesting STEM academies. I would argue that you could do a Montessori type program as an example in an elementary school and have that as a magnet school. We'd offer it to our own kids first, and then I'm sure there'd be vacancies, and you offer it to other districts. So I don't believe some people say, we're not putting our kids first. No, I think if there's something great that we can offer, we offer it to our own kids first. And then other kids from other districts could then join in. And we would either eliminate our ADA drop, our enrollment drop, or at least reduce the fall so it's less. Basically, we're going to lose about 8 to 10 million, depending on the type of kid. We're going to lose for every drop, every 1,000 kids that we drop.
Wow, that's quite a bit of money.
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. So, and the kids, when they leave, they don't leave in easy to manage areas. So in other words, if you lose 2 kids at that school, you can't just say, okay, we're gonna lay off a teacher, or we're gonna allow through attrition, or we're gonna close a school. Doesn't work that way because they never leave in easy packages, right? So you're having to figure out, scattered throughout the district, we could have 400 or 500 empty classrooms, but they're not conveniently packaged in one school.
Right.
So they're scattered around. So it's not an easy thing to manage, but I'm aware of districts that have done it. I worked in a district which did that. As a cabinet level manager, I did that, and we did some interesting things to attract. So bottom line is, I think there's things we could do. I also think we need to look at why kids go to private school and figure out what we missed in providing services so that the parents felt they had to send their child to a private school, with the huge financial sacrifice, obviously, that entails. So it's not that, how do I phrase this? We are not providing a religious education, and we can't. We're a public school. So I understand why sometimes parents want to send their kids to a school, a parochial school, as an example, that has a fairly rigorous religious component to those offerings. I get it, understand, fully support that. What I don't understand is, or what I want to understand, is why do parents send kids to a private school because they think we're not meeting their needs? How did we not meet their needs? What could we do differently to meet their needs? So it's another potential reduction in loss of revenue if we figure out what is driving enrollment in a private school and try to reverse that. If it's appropriate. If there's some, well, because my child needs religious education. Well, we're not.
You're not ever
we're not
going to
do
compete.
that. Nope. No, we're not going to do that. Don't want to. Don't expect us to. Not appropriate for us to do that. It is absolutely inappropriate for us to do that. So what I do think we can do. So looking at those components, one of the things that we don't have in this district, which has been a problem for a lot of other large districts, is charter schools. We don't have charter schools, and I think charter schools are the customer's way, the parent's way of telling you you're failing. You're not meeting the needs of the parent community and the kids.
They're not reflecting the community.
They are
public education.
Yeah, what I would say, they are the canary in the coal mine, if you will. You know, for those that aren't familiar with that term, they used to keep canaries in cages for the odorless gases that would occur sometimes in the coal mines, to give fair. If the canary stopped singing, chatting, that was your clue that you might have a problem. You'd look, oh, it's keeled over, get the heck out, abandon the mine because there's poisonous gases. So charter schools are, I think, they're allowed by law, and the public can create them. And when they create them, I believe it's their way of saying to their school board and their school district, you're not meeting our needs. And we want to point out, we don't have charter schools, and we're one of the only large districts in California that doesn't have charter schools. And I'd like to think it's because, for the most part, we've been meeting the vast majority of parents' needs. But again, if we get cocky and we believe that we're doing a great job, you know, in a year or two, we end up having a charter petitioned in the district. So we have to constantly on guard to understand what our parents and our kids need, and then trying to figure out a way to meet it within reason. You know, I want my kids to be in a 12-to-1 school environment. Well, I'm sorry, but you're not going to get that in the public schools unless you're one of those districts that get $25,000 a year per kid. At $8,000 per kid, it isn't going to happen. So again, within reason, what can we do to meet the needs? So I think those are some of the things that I would look at: STEM, Montessori, district of choice. I think we could do a lot to help stem the tide of enrollment drop. Again, we can't do anything with the fact that kids are aging out. We can't deal with the fact we can't deal with the reality of our kindergarten classes are now lower in total enrollment than our senior classes, you know, our seniors that are graduating. So we have a built-in lower number now going to work their way through the system. And we'll be a smaller district as a result, unless we take steps. I don't think we'll ever get to 32,000 again. I think what we can get to is how do we mitigate the drop so that we stay as close to 32,000 as possible, recognizing that we're going to continue to have an enrollment drop because the demographics are changing. The number of people bringing kids, all the new houses in the Doherty Valley are for the most part built out, right? And those kids are aging out. The new families that came in with young kids, they're aging out. It's just a reality we have to deal with. So we can ignore it at our peril, or we can deal with it effectively. And I propose, as I always have on this board, we're going to deal with it effectively. And again, I am but one vote. So one of the things I have to do is I have to convince the rest of my board, at least 2 more board members. I'm very good at counting heads.
Well, there are only 5 of you. It's easy.
Only 5. You're right. You're right. So I have to count heads. Our current superintendent, by the way, used to have 22 on his board when he was at his prior district. He had 22 board members. So pretty hard to count heads when you got 22. So I like 5. So bottom line is, if I can get 2 more people to agree with me, I think there's some interesting things we're going to be able to do to help mitigate it. But you can rest assured that with our board and the administration that we have currently, we're not going to ignore the problem and until we get taken over by the state. The other thing that happens is districts get taken over because they don't size their offerings appropriate to their enrollment. They continue to think that one of the things that one of the things that Sac City has gotten in trouble, Sacramento City Unified, is they have more schools than their enrollment warrants. They've lost thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of kids, but their enrollment doesn't support the number of schools that they have.
Right, because the facilities and whatnot still need to be taken care of.
Absolutely. It costs around $750,000 to $800,000 a year to maintain an elementary, whether you have 800 kids in it or 200 kids in it. It costs about $1 million to $1.25 million for a middle school and about $2 million a year for a high school. So, and I'm not saying we need to close any schools. Believe me, I'm not saying that. Please, I am not saying that.
Wait, are you saying that? You're not saying that. Okay.
I am not saying that.
Just checking.
No, but we are going to have to look at how we right-size the organization to ensure that we can still afford the level of staffing that we have, the programs that we offer, that we can still afford to offer. So it's figuring out ways to become more effective and more efficient. I've spent 20 years on the board pushing for that with a lot of success. When I was an administrator in large districts, I did the same thing. I was the guy that got to go and reorganize the admissions and records process at a college, or go figure out why it's taking forever to get purchasing, to get stuff out to the school sites, or how do we reduce absenteeism among our employees? So that's one of the things I spent my 30-plus year career doing, and I brought that to the school board and doing the same thing here. So I think we're going to be able to manage it if we think out of box, if we think innovatively, if we don't say, but we've never done it that way. If that's the first thing you say out of your mouth, then I got a problem with you, because difficult times call for thinking out of box and thinking for different ways. We may have always done it that way. In today's world, is that the right way to continue to think?
On that note, having never done it that way, I can't imagine that in all of your years as an educator and administrator out on the boards, that you've dealt with a situation that has such horrific polarizing communication. So for instance, we're talking about these screenshots, right? Somebody sends you a screenshot of a communication. There are outright lies. There are sleights of hand. There are all kinds of nuances that we've all actually come to expect from social media. Everybody knows that social media is just absolute junk until it says something that they agree with.
Exactly.
It's unbelievable that people have this incredible skepticism with opinions that run counter to theirs. But the second they see a meme that agrees with what they think, they send it to every single person. Right. So
that's the benefit of social media and the burden of social media. Yes, and I don't have a problem with somebody who echoes something that's wrong if they didn't know it's wrong. I have a problem with the social media people that what you're saying is objectively a lie,
or only a half-truth,
and you say it anyway.
So,
and I have a problem with those people.
I think you'd be crazy to not to. I mean, they're at the core of our political discourse.
Sadly, and the political, as I've said to everybody that will listen. I keep hitting your mic. I apologize. It is not an earthquake. What I say for anybody that will listen is, providing a quality education shouldn't be a political issue. It's doing the right thing for kids. And sadly, we become political in this state. We become adversarial in this state because part of it is social media, because people, they read it and it must be true. I read it, so it said it right there. It's got to be real. But also because education has unfortunately become a political football in this state, and I'd argue in the whole country.
Sure. So one of the things that has been brought up is, hey, the communication from the district, the communication from the board, and the executive team has been poor. Mm-hmm. And I'm not an advocate for censoring. Quite to the contrary. I believe in language. I believe in communication. I mean, obviously, here we are. We're 2 hours and 20 minutes into this podcast, and it sometimes takes this much time to understand the nuances of the issues. And once people, in general, what I do with my families, with my students, I never sugarcoat the problems. You have to say, look, this is what we're dealing with. And when parents don't understand it, you have to take more time and explain, okay, these are the mistakes I'm seeing, this is what we can do about it. But it takes time. And it seems that in the age of social media and screenshots and group texts and all these things, it's so easy for people to get poor information passed around. So although you likely have never done it, do you have an idea or a plan or some philosophy that says, look, we have to improve our mass communication. We have to improve our way that we explain the problems that we're looking at and explain the solutions that we've considered and why we're taking this course of action.
So you obviously you must have a bug in the closed sessions in the boardroom?
No, actually.
Because that is the very argument that I have been making, is that we need to step up our game in how we communicate. How do you communicate complex issues in a way that people understand it? I understand finance. I understand legal issues. I understand educational issues because of my experiences. I am not the average person because of my background. I don't expect somebody who, who is an MD. I don't. Let me put it this way: I'm not expecting to cut somebody open and work on their heart. I don't expect the guy who's working on somebody's heart to also understand all the nuances and the finances in school administration. So we all have our levels of expertise. We all have our areas. So how do we take what we all know innately at the cellular level, because we're immersed in it every day? How do we take that information and convey it in a way that the average person that isn't doing this every day understands? And that's the hard part, because sometimes complex things are difficult sometimes to explain easily. That's why they're complex. So how do you do it in a way that you can get the message across?
I have an idea. Don't send out another email. I'm just throwing that out there for every parent. Another email, like, you can't slog through them. I mean, any parent in the district at this point is getting 5 or 6 a day. I mean, throwing out more emails and more things for parents to slog through. Don't do that, please God.
In 1 week, we got over 10,000 emails. Now, the president of the board, is one of the tasks of the president, is to respond to all the emails.
10,000.
Well, guess who didn't? There was no way. It was impossible to do that. So I left that to the director of communications. I did one set of emails for about 300 that I sent together, all kind of saying the same thing. I bunched them together and sent them out. And boy, did I get vilified for having not sent out individual emails to everybody. There was... So I just, you can't respond to 10,000.
At scale, you can't do that.
You can't do that. It's impossible. So, but what we can do is we can communicate better. One of my, when I was taking journalism courses, one thing I learned was about gray space and white space. And if you have this big giant amount of gray text, and you haven't put your bullet points in surrounded by white, the key points you're trying to make aren't going to be read. They're going to get skipped. The brain isn't going to see them because they're just the way the human brain works. So you have to make things easy. I always call it following the bouncing ball. That dates me. The Mitch Miller, wasn't it Mitch Miller in the 60s, I think? You're too young.
Yeah, way too young for this one.
But it was you probably heard the term follow the bouncing ball.
I've heard keep your eye on the ball.
Yeah.
We're all on the same boat.
All right, follow the bouncing ball. It's from Mitch Miller. He was a guy in the 60s. He did sing-alongs, and he had the songs on the screen, and
yes,
he had a little
I know
ball,
what you're talking about now.
And they would follow, so you
sure
follow. That dates me. So as a kid, I remember follow the bouncing ball. Anyway,
they had TV when you were a kid?
I know.
Okay.
Rub it in.
Okay.
That's We were still using smoke signals.
Okay.
And mirrors, the mountaintop. So what we would do, I did go to an elementary school that still had a bell.
Really?
The custodian would ring the bell. Yes.
Was it a cowbell?
No, it was a big bell up in the tower. But anyway, so the bottom line is we have to learn to communicate better. We are recruiting for a director of communications.
I know a guy with a podcast.
There you go. I'll send you an application later.
Yeah, right.
But no conflict of interest here.
He's an SAT tutor, though. He might be kind of busy right now.
Yeah, right.
He's got a lot going on.
He's got a lot going. So, but director of communication, somebody that understands how to do it. We're a large enough district. We need somebody who can basically communicate the things that are hitting us literally daily. There is probably no greater existential threat than the pandemic that we faced this year, combined with the state's budget crisis and declining enrollment. Those three together have, this is probably, in my opinion, the single largest threat to this district we've had since the Great Depression in the 30s, when it was a high school district and a bunch of elementary districts. And how we handle it, how we come up to the challenge, how we work, hopefully, collaboratively together. People know who I'm talking about. We work together. We're going to get through this because I think we can. Ultimately, there's always an end to something, whether it's something bad or something good. We can get through this together, but only if we're together. If we're busy at each other's throats, this will not end well. It will not end well for the kids. It will not end well for the employees. And it sure the heck won't end well for the district as a whole. So we have to work together. One of the things that, speaking of social media, one of the things that I've seen a consistent pattern is we don't know how to manage our budget. We're spending money like there's no tomorrow. Not true. One of the ones that I saw, and I actually talked to one of the parents that was advocating for why we were doing this wrong. We bought 5 trucks. Somebody had commented about what the heck on the agenda. I think it was in April's or May's agenda. We had 5 trucks we were buying. What the heck were we doing 5 trucks when we're in the middle of a pandemic? We bought 5 trucks because our staff, at the direction of the board, has been looking at ways to save money. Well, how can you save money by buying 5 trucks? Because we were eliminating the contractor that was providing some of our ground services, and we determined we would save $180,000 a year by bringing it in-house. There you go. So, did we have to? Now, we could have told the groundskeepers, get all your stuff together, and you're to walk to each school. They would spend 2/3 of their day walking and then 1/3 of the day actually working on the grounds. I think a better way would have been to provide them with a truck so they could put their equipment, their lawnmowers, their edgers, their other things, and their bodies into a truck to get them to the next site. That's what we spent the money for 5 new trucks. So that's one example. So
this is the exact thing that I'm talking about. The nature of making hard decisions and the nature of planning ahead is you have to know what's coming down the pipe, right? Like the truck example is absolutely on point. It's so easy to say, what the hell are you doing? You spent $100,000 on F-150s. And the answer is, yeah, it's a 200% return in the first year. We save this much money. This is how much it costs. What do you want us to do? And unless people have, one, an accessible, easy to digest means of communication and a desire to actually dig into the issues instead of just feel like they have a righteous position. Like, how could you spend a single dollar? Well, I'm spending $1 because it makes me $2. Exactly. That's a pretty reasonable position to have.
In every district I've managed from a financial standpoint, and as my role as a board member, that's the way I look at it. If I'm going to spend $1, what am I going to get for it? What am I going to get in terms of better service to the kids, a better educational experience in the classroom, or I'm spending $1, but now I'm going to save 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever down the road. So another good example, we heavily invested in solar. Heavily. We have spent tens of millions of dollars on solar. But we're making millions of dollars in lower electricity bills. We have a high school, 80% of their electricity is generated through solar. That would, in the past, have been in our PG&E bill. So initially, we're having to pay off the solar. You know, we borrowed money to build the solar, so we're having to pay that off. But every year, the general fund does see an increase in the amount that's now available for other things in the classroom because we're paying less for electricity. Doesn't make PG&E happy, makes the taxpayers and the district really happy because ultimately we're going to be vastly off the grid, if you will. It's the other thing we're now looking at, by the way, given the things that PG&E has hit us with in the last year with outages and everything. One of the things we're looking at is how do we make ourselves more off the grid so that we don't have to shut down school because PG&E decides there's a windy day, and we now have no electricity.
Right. My wife and I had the same conversation a couple of years ago. We invested in the Tesla house batteries.
Yes.
And power goes out the other day, or whenever, and we literally seamlessly flip onto the battery.
Right. So we're looking at that very thing. Didn't have to worry about the power grid in the past. You know, occasionally you would have a problem. Now it's going to become a regular occurrence. So that's unacceptable. So we're going to have to figure out how to deal with that in a way that allows us to continue education seamlessly in spite of electricity going out. So those are some things and we're doing that. We're looking at that. We have, a great business staff and facility staff that looks at that. Let's talk about other things that people don't understand. We have different funds. Where you get in trouble in this state is there's a thing called the school accounting manual. If you take money from the general fund and you go spend it on things you're not legally allowed to spend on the general fund, you get in trouble. The auditors will get on you. The county will get on you. Some things are illegal, as in criminal, if you do it. And so somebody says, well, why did you... Oh, I think there was another complaint about the light poles at San Ramon Valley High. Remember? Those light poles, by the way, I think are from the 30s. Somebody said they were like from 1938 or something. So why in God's name are you changing out the light poles? Well, they're old. They're not state approved. Maybe they didn't approve light poles in 1938, but and they need to be replaced. So why are you spending all this money on light poles? Because it's coming out of our facilities fund, not general fund. It's coming out of facilities. The law says 3% of our general fund must be set aside to put into a facilities fund that must be spent only on facilities. We cannot spend it on giving raises. We can't spend it on classroom supplies. It can only be spent on facilities like, decrepit old light poles, as an example. Bleachers. We've replaced bleachers at some of the high schools.
So you get people wrangled up over teachers, the teachers union, and you guys being theoretically engaged in a salary dispute, and then all of a sudden you're saying we don't have the money to give what you're asking, and you're replacing the light poles at the same time, and they say, why don't you just take the light pole money and give it to the teachers?
Can't. It's a violation of the law. Can't do it. So also we have another fund that the developers put in that also goes into that facilities fund. So you build up on Comunitas Sahara. There used to be a little nursery there, and they're now putting in, I don't know how many homes. I can't tell. It looks like maybe 10.
I was going to say, I think around a dozen.
Yeah.
Sahara Nursery.
Yeah, that one. All right. So that developer has given money, or will be giving money if you haven't already, to the district that goes into a developer fund to help mitigate the costs of their development. So that goes into our fund. It can only be spent, by the way, can't go into the general fund, can only be spent on things related to facilities. So that's another thing people don't understand. The other thing they don't understand is the issue of our facilities in general. Our facilities, by the way, when we recruited for our superintendent, our facilities we were commented by all the people we interviewed, they went and toured the district. A smart candidate would do that. You toured the district. They were amazed at the quality of the facilities, the schools, compared to most districts that look pretty run down. Our schools don't look run down. They look great. And they do that because this board, and I'll proudly raise my hand. I was the one that was screaming bloody murder when I got on the board about the fact that we weren't maintaining our facilities appropriately. And so we've invested literally new schools, almost $1 billion in principal. And when you factor in the costs of interest and everything that we would have had to pay, probably $1.5 billion in new schools. By the way, none of it came out of the taxpayers' dollars because we got our developers to build them. So
wow.
Unlike Dublin, which you still can't build their high school because they don't have the money, we were able to build Doherty Valley High, an almost $200 million high school, with not 1 cent coming from the taxpayers, because we were aggressive in negotiating with the developers of the Doherty Valley about what those schools were going to look like, how it was going to get funded, what the sizes of them would be, all done to make sure the taxpayers weren't saddled with literally $1.5 billion in principal and interest payments over 30 years to pay for all these new schools. Didn't cost the taxpayers 1 red cent. The maintenance of the existing facilities, we have billions of dollars worth of facilities, land and buildings that to replace would cost an astronomical sum of money. If you spend $10,000 on a roofing problem, you spent $10,000. If you don't spend $10,000 on a roofing problem, you now have a $2 or $3 million problem because you have dry rot, the walls are now soggy, you have black mold, you have a massive problem that you now have to evacuate the wing of the building or the whole building. I'd rather spend $10,000. Thank you. I want to spend $1. If I can spend $1 and save down the road from having to spend $20, that's also on my list of really bright moves.
A list of really bright moves.
I'm just saying. So from a facilities perspective, we have an incredibly aggressive program. With the money that we spend, the 3% that we're required to spend out of the general fund in a separate account, and then our facility dollars that we've gotten either from facility bonds or from developer fees, and we've maintained our schools. Look at San Ramon Valley High. Look at the buildings we just put up that went up for San Ramon Valley High. Oh my God! I don't know if you've gone through them or not.
No, I have. So,
oh my God.
San Ramon hires me to do the boosters rather,
right,
to do entrance essay seminars, and so yes, they're beautiful, gorgeous,
phenomenal, right? Paid for in that case, paid for by mostly facility bond money that the taxpayers in this valley very generously indebted themselves, but also some developer money as well. So we combine those. So the bottom line is, we use our money wisely and effectively. There are other districts in this county that have spent $150 million on management of their facilities program that is of similar size. They spent $150 million, and they've run out of money, and they're only so they're actually indebted more than we are. They are only about half finished because they ran out of money because it wasn't managed effectively. And they spent $150 million in taxpayer money to outside management firms to manage it for them. We took a different approach. I insisted in 2002 that when we started our first major, like $260 or $70 million bond, I would not support it unless we agreed to hire our own assistant superintendent of facilities, managing, not using outside managers, using our own, and then making sure we hired the best in the state, because we were dealing with taxpayer money. I didn't want to end up like, again, I won't name the district, but a district in this county, shoddy work, they've run out of money, they're not half finished, or just a little over half finished, and they've spent $150 million in fees. Our total cost in the last 20 years has been in the neighborhood of about 15 to 20 million. And that's because we paid people, our employees, basically. We hired people. Let's see here. And is there a benefit to that? Well, if you spend $150 million to outside managers, outside consultants, that's $150 million that can't be spent on modernizing another school.
Well, sure, naturally. I mean, if you're saving money, you're saving money.
Hello. So what we did is we decided to spend our money on projects, boots on the ground, if you will.
Sure.
Rather than on high-priced consultants that wouldn't do as good a job as our own people as long as we hired the right people. And we did. We hired some quality people. We're told by people in the state that we have the best managed facilities program in the state of California. And what that has translated to millions and millions and millions of dollars. I would estimate at least 150 to 200 million in savings, minimum, that we have saved because of the way we managed our program as opposed to what most districts do.
Sure. So I mean, the schools are beautiful. If you just walk through them, you see right away.
And you can go to other districts in this county of similar aged schools that don't look anything like ours.
Right.
So that doesn't mean we have gold-plated restrooms in the boys and girls restrooms. We do not. We're not stupid. We use the money wisely and effectively. But it means that we're looking to the long term. We don't put in a composite roof that has to get replaced in 10 years. We put in a metal roof that's good for 75 years. We do the same with our outside buildings. You've seen the plywood that a lot of schools have in other districts. They use plywood siding. Why? Because it's really, really cheap.
But it lasts about half as long.
Less. It's you got to replace it frequently, and the maintenance, because the hidden cost of not building facilities, looking for ways to do it effectively with the lowest cost to the long-term ultimate cost to the taxpayer, is you got to paint that siding every 3 or 4 years, because it's plywood. It doesn't last.
Right.
So we looked at all that, and we're building our schools to last generations, not the next election cycle, frankly.
One more thing, because again, I so appreciate your time. We're going on 2 hours and 45 minutes here. One big thing that a lot of people I think would ask would be about the management of the schools in the pandemic. So let's say we get through this. Okay, let's say, and which we hopefully will.
We'll finally get to pandemic issues. Finally,
right.
Yes. Okay.
Right. The hot button issues.
Right.
What if you had a magic wand and you got all of the votes on the board and everyone would listen to you? How do you prepare to manage this situation differently if it happens again? And what would that look like? Would it be, having 500 pop-up tents and we do education on the field? Would it be investing in technology so we double down and make a better virtual classroom? What would it be for you?
I think there ought to be a 2-part answer to that.
Make it 3-part.
All right.
We got time.
Let's talk about what we're doing. Let's talk about what didn't work and what hasn't worked or what has worked as we face this pandemic. Nobody saw this coming. We had enough reserves to cover. Remember, I talked about reserves, how important reserves are, So reserves are not for what is, they're for what if. We had enough in reserves to get us by with some additional help from the state. They gave us some money. All the districts got money to help with the pandemic. But so within literally a few days, we had to go from a highly effective in-person learning experience to an external, a remote learning experience, a distance learning. It did not go well. It did not go well at all. And if anybody's watched me at the board meetings, some people called me harsh. I like to think I was honest. I wanted the parents to know that I can't speak for the whole board. I'm president of the board, but I still only, speaking for myself. This board member knew that we did not do the kind of job we were hoping to be able to pull off for the spring. And some people were very angry at me for saying that. Some teachers let me know how devastated they were by my comments because they had worked so hard. Everybody worked hard. I think everybody did the best they could. But if you've been, a math teacher for 30 years and nobody ever prepped you for having to now take that, turn it upside down, and teach it in a Zoom environment or a Google Classroom environment, I'm sorry, I don't expect anybody to be a superhero and be able to pull that off without some missteps and some errors.
Right, and at the same time, you don't deny that there were missteps and errors.
Oh,
right. Like
yeah,
I did the transition. I
got in trouble for saying it, but I don't care.
Right.
I'm always
you got to call a horse a horse.
I'm going to do what's best for kids. Always have, always will. And if that means people don't vote for me for re-election because I was blunt in my comments, I can live with that. I can leave the board if the majority vote against me. I can leave the board knowing that I did what I thought was best for the students of this district. And I think calling it like it was in the spring was the right thing to do, to let people know I heard you, and I think the rest of the board joined me in that as well. I was probably more harsh than some of the others, but that's okay. I think we all said, ultimately, this was not our finest hour. And not because we didn't try,
right,
but because nobody really knew. There was no blueprint for doing this effectively. There was no textbook for doing this effectively. It was trial and error, and everybody was kind of bumping around trying to figure out what to do. We were talking to other colleagues. Districts were calling other districts, and we were all trying. Nobody did it right. Stanford, the president of Stanford, made a famous point in the late spring about how, no, we did not do a good job. Palo Alto, highest, they're number one in the state, by the way. We're close. We're close. We're sixth in the state. But they are, but they're 3 times funded.
I was just going to say.
Just want to point that out.
Right.
But Palo Alto, they said they didn't do a good job. Some Irvine Unified, which is kind of a sister in Orange County, it's similar demographics, similar size. We kind of look to them and say, hey, did we beat them this year? On our proficiencies. Yes, we did.
Well done.
And so they also, nobody came forward and said, no, we aced it. We hit home run after home run after home run out of the ballpark. Nobody said that. So we all recognize that, okay, we didn't do a good job. Kids deserve the best that we can give. All right, what did we learn from that? And I would argue we did. The board made it clear to staff, all right, take what we did, what worked, what didn't work, talk to your colleagues in other districts, talk to experts, whatever we got to do. We've got to hit a home run for the fall. Cannot allow this to happen. The feedback we're getting from parents, the vast majority of parents, is we're doing a pretty darn good job. We're doing an excellent job for some kids. We're doing an okay job for others. I would argue where we're missing out is in our especially our special needs kids. And I feel particularly hard-pressed to try to turn that around. So, bottom line is, I think our parents overall think we're doing a good job. I've also made it very clear that that the remote learning modality is maybe something we have to do because we have no choice. And so we're going to do the best job that we can. Is it ever going to be, for the vast majority of kids, is it ever going to be as effective as in person? And the answer is no.
No, it's always going to be.
In person
yes.
is always better.
Yes.
There are always exceptions to the rule. With 32,000 kids, you can always point where some kid actually distance learning is more effective for them. But it's the rare person. It's the outlier, if you will, from a statistical perspective. The vast majority of kids need to be in person. So again, I've been criticized by some in this highly hyper divided community that we're in about going to school, going back to school, not going back to school, distance learning, in-person learning. I probably made enemies by saying that I believe we need to be in person as soon as possible. That doesn't mean that we need to be in person without recognizing and mitigating the health risks that we'll be faced with by going to in person. So that means appropriate social distancing. That means ramping up our sanitation efforts. That means having like sanitation stations in each classroom. That means the wearing of masks. That means social distancing in the hallways. I saw that picture of the school district in Georgia somewhere. I can't remember where. You may have seen it. No kid was wearing a mask, and they were literally like
on top of each other.
Sardines.
Yeah. Right.
And gee, strangely enough, a couple of weeks later, there were COVID.
An uptick in cases.
Big time.
Absolutely.
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time. Right. Well, what the heck were they thinking? So, but in the hyper divided world that we live in, if you believe in person, you apparently can't also believe in safety measures. So I want to make it clear to anybody listening, if anybody's still listening after 2 hours and 50 minutes.
I think you'd be surprised.
Okay, good. I believe we need to get back as soon as possible in a legal way and in a cohort that meets the standards that the state or the county has ordered us to be in. And appropriate social distancing, mask wearing, and safety protocols in place. Every day that goes by without kids in an in-person environment is a day lost forever for them. They'll never get it back. They'll never get first grade back. They'll never get fourth grade, sixth grade, ninth, whatever. They're never going to get back. So that doesn't mean it's the only thing we offer, because I'm also advocating that we offer a robust distance learning as well for those that do not wish to come back to in-person. I don't believe we force anybody into one or the other. So what we do is we offer parallel programs. We find out what program you're interested in having your child in. You don't get to, by the way, pick from week to week. I like in-person. No, I want distance. Oh, I want back to in-person. You're not going to be able to do that. Scheduling and trying to figure out staffing for the teachers would be impossible to do that. So at the point at which we say to the parents, this is what we're offering for in-person, this is the schedule, this is how it's going to work, what do you want to do? Give us a choice, and you get to decide what you want to do. I could be wrong. I'm guessing 60 to 70 will want to be in person.
I'd guess higher,
yeah,
depending on what the protocol is.
Well,
but yeah,
again,
I
it
think
depends
a lot of people,
it depends on when people see what those protocols are,
right,
as to whether they feel comfortable enough sending their child back.
Right.
So right now, if you look, well, the teachers union president has said that she doesn't believe, she was quoted in the Times, I don't believe we should go back until there are 0 infections in Contra Costa County. Well, I don't think that's not realistic.
Well, again, as you pointed out earlier, the president of the teachers union is obligated to do what she thinks is best for her constituents. That's
Absolutely.
right, for her members.
Absolutely.
So for her members, for the teachers, is it best for their health and safety to wait until there's 0 cases anywhere in Contra Costa County to go back? Yes. Theoretically, it may have also been better for them to get a 20% raise.
Yes, I would love to give them a 20% raise. But you're right. A lot of things we want to do.
Right.
So yes. So
the point is,
but
all I'm saying is, I'm not saying you're doing it poorly. What I'm saying is, yes, the teachers, the president of the teachers union is looking out for the teachers, and that's
her
the
job.
stated job. That's right.
That's her job.
So,
I commend her for trying to do her job. That's the right thing to do. That's
exactly.
Right.
But is that necessarily what's best for the rest of the community as well?
And I'd argue that it probably isn't, because life rarely presents us, and we get philosophical here, life rarely presents us with clean yes, no answers. Yes, this is the right thing to do. No, this is the wrong thing to do. Very often it's shades of gray things are rarely yes or no, binary. Very often you've got half a dozen different things you're having to look at, and so you're ending up having to balance the very often conflicting priorities into something that makes sense for the greatest good for the greatest number. And does that mean 100% of the people are going to be happy? No. Does that mean 100% of the people are going to benefit equally? No, because you have all these conflicting imperatives. Because if it was up to me and I didn't care about money, I'd pay our teachers $400,000. $400,000. I hit it. Sorry. I'd pay our teachers $400,000. That was for emphasis. I'd pay our teachers $400,000 a year, and I'd make sure they all could buy homes in the valley so they could afford to live here. I think it'd be great. And I'd do the same with our classified employees. I'd do the same with our bus drivers and our custodians and our school secretaries and our accountants. I'd love to do that. Oh, there's this conflicting imperative. It's called the budget. If I did that, would the budget stay balanced? Would we have money to pay those $400,000 salaries for a teacher? Or would the check bounce? And the answer is the check would bounce, of course. So these are conflicting imperatives, a graphic example of conflicting imperatives. So where do you find that sweet spot? And in this COVID world that we live in, you have to find the sweet spot. So you provide as robust an in-person learning experience as you can, but also mitigating the risks to the best of your reasonable ability. Will a child come to school ill with the cold or the flu, or heaven help us, COVID? The answer is probably yes. Thousands of kids lose a day or more of school every year because they're ill. They get the cold, they get a flu, they get, mumps, God knows what, heaven help us. Measles. We had some kids with measles last year.
Right.
So the bottom line is, kids get ill. Teachers get ill. That's why we have substitutes. Not everybody is here all the time. So if you're waiting to have zero infection and zero illness, kids will never go back to school ever again. Everything will be distance learning for all eternity. So obviously that isn't right. So we've got to find that sweet spot. So, I'm willing to have that conversation with my colleagues on the board and with administration about what that sweet spot is. That's one of the things we're going to talk about tonight at the board meeting, 7:00. Hint, hint, hint. About, if you're interested, about what we're going to do.
Is that broadcast live, by the way?
It is. It's on YouTube. So you can go to our website, to the Board of Education website.
I'll put the link in the description.
Yeah, and you
so
can
people
also,
can find it.
The link is also there on my www.reelectmarvel.com. It's also there as well on the Contact Me page. It has a link there to get to our both our past board meeting videos as well as the current one that will be occurring tonight. So the issue for us is, what is that sweet spot? We also have to negotiate with the unions, not on the decision, in spite of the recent news reports that the LA Teachers Union told the school board in LA that they wouldn't go back, period, and they had veto power. They do not legally have veto power. The district has the board. Your elected representatives will decide whether we go back. What the unions have a right to negotiate are the effects, the impacts of that on their working conditions, like safety as an example. Are we going to provide them with appropriate personal protective equipment, PPEs? Are we going to provide masks? Are we going to enforce social distancing? Are we going to allow all the teachers to come together in one room and have a staff meeting, in person? No, we're not. That's the bottom line. So we're going to allow kids to be wandering around in the halls, in groups of 20 and 30 at a time, all bunched together like sardines. No, we're not. So those are things that are, quote unquote, negotiable.
And just to be clear, you're saying no, you're not to the board meetings, not the PPE and social distancing, because you listed three things, and the last was a board meeting, and you said no, we're not. Of course, you will be providing appropriate PPE.
Yes.
Of course,
absolutely.
you will be providing safe environments. You just won't be asking them to come together in a board meeting in the same room.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
No. I wanted to be clear there.
Meeting. Yeah, we're not going to do a staff. Right. No, we're not going to do that. So we're going to do appropriate social distancing. One of the issues that we've had is that we keep getting, and what frustrates not just me and the rest of the board and the administration, it frustrates our parents to no end. I get the emails constantly every day about, told us this a month ago and now you're telling us this. It's because the county and the state, primarily the county, keeps changing the rules.
Right. It could be day to day. You could tell them something on Monday, and Tuesday it could be completely different, not your fault at all.
So there have been multiple changes, and and I'd like to think it's not nefarious. But if you believed in a Machiavellian plots, it's like it's designed to ensure that we never reopen again, at least as far as the county having any say as to whether we reopen. When we go, the way it works is we have now, the state just changed used to be the watch list,
Mm-hmm.
Now we've got colors. So the purple is the worst. I always thought red was the worst, but apparently in the states,
Code purple.
well, these are the same people that run the DMV and are running the bullet train project. So
Do you know the colors for DEF CON?
I have
the
no
numbers
idea. I have
are
no idea. But
were
maybe
like
that's it.
threat
Maybe it's the
level
same
orange or something.
I have no idea.
Anyway.
Is it red the worst? I don't know, but who knows?
I don't think so. So in this case, purple.
Okay, so purple is the worst, which is what we are in now. There is the belief that this week we'll go out of the purple and go to the red, or no later next week, we hope. And when we're in the purple, we are required to follow the counties. They give us the authority, or don't give us the authority to reopen, from a waiver perspective.
Yes.
And it's only for K through 6. And they said we don't have K through 6 schools, we have K through 5s. So our K through 5 schools could potentially reopen in a social distancing environment, which is like no more than 14 in a class. So you'd split the group into 2 cohorts. Typical class would have either one couple days a week cohort A, a couple days a week cohort B, or 2.5 days a week cohort A, 2.5 weeks, 2.5 days a week cohort B. So bottom line is you split it half and half, and then when you're not in school, you're doing distance learning stuff. So that's the concept of what hybrid is all about, and we can't do it without their approval. So
And that's purple.
That's in the purple. Once we're in the red, the county no longer has to make a decision. It's our decision as a board.
And
so,
you said we're theoretically going into the red.
But then you have to be so many weeks. I've heard 2 weeks. Somebody else told me 3 weeks. I believe it's 2 in the red before you're then no longer beholden to the county, and now you can make your own decisions as long as you're following appropriate health protocols.
Sure.
Obviously, but you don't have to get permission from anybody once you're in the red for at least 2 weeks, and then so what I've been arguing for from the very beginning, and those that, you can hate me for saying it, but I'm not excluding. It's not an either or situation. We go back, ask for the waiver. We go back in a hybrid model. For those that want to go back, we continue a robust distance learning environment. For those that don't want to go back, we do, and we can do both. I'm assured by administration that we can do both at the elementary level, because right now under the waivers we can't do anything for secondary. It's only elementary. Once we get into the red and we're 2 weeks into the red, once we get at least 2 weeks into the red, then the county no longer has any say, and we could then do K-12 hybrid. We can do that. So staff has been working on making those kind of preparations, but also working on submitting a proposal for whether or not we submit a waiver. What happened a couple weeks ago is the county, big surprise. Again, if you believe in Machiavellian plots, they could see that we were getting ready to submit a waiver. They threw a whammy at us, and they said, "Oh, where you could have one teacher in 2 cohorts? No, you can only have one teacher in 1 cohort." So in other words, the same teacher can't teach both halves of the class.
Right. So 2.5 days and then another 2.5 days. The teacher can't teach both.
Different teacher.
Right.
So all we need is $200 million in additional revenue, and we can hire the 1,000+ teachers that it would cost to do that. So what are the odds of that happening in short notice? Nope, not happening. So again, if you're Machiavellian, then what's happened is the county has basically, and was told, by the way, I'm on good authority, was that the county was told by all the assembled superintendents, you're in effect making it impossible for us to submit a waiver and go into a hybrid. And their response was, we are standing firm. So, does that mean we're just going to take it lying down? I don't know. I'm going to be suggesting at tonight's board meeting, we'll see. Preview, watch at 7. I am proposing that we submit the waiver request anyway and let the county turn it down. We know what's going to happen if we don't submit a waiver. We won't be able to go back until we're into the red long enough. And assuming we stay in the red, because what if we go back into the purple? Which could happen if there's an uptick, right? Then we end up going back into the purple.
You're going to get 10,000 emails if you go back into the purple asking why you came back to hybrid and now going back online. That's exactly what's going to happen.
God help us. So bottom line is, if we submit the request, let the county reject it. Did we meet the final criteria? We've got everything else in line. The other thing is, we were originally told when this started that the county was going to do contact tracing. I was told by a representative of the county that the county was going to hire 400 contact tracers. Wasn't going to be our responsibility. Guess what? They changed the rules on us. Guess who has to do contact tracing? The school district. We're not the health department. We're educators. But now we have to do the health department's job, and if we want to reopen, we've got to have contact tracing. The other thing that they were told is the county's going to do testing. Well, guess what? County's not going to do testing. They say we must do the testing. And the county, which was at some points taking 7 and 8 weeks to get results back, right? When the county was doing it, they mandated we had to have our tests done in 72 hours. Which makes, by the way, perfect sense. A test that takes 7 weeks to get the results back is a meaningless test.
Sure.
And
some would argue even 72 hours is meaningless, but it's better than 7 weeks.
Yeah, right.
I mean, hopefully we'll get 24 hours pretty soon.
I'd like to see, there are some products out there that are being worked on it. Like Yale has a product that they're working on. It would literally, it'd be like, if you have a dipstick that you put into your spa, your pool, same concept. You just put it on your tongue for, I don't know, pick a number, 10 seconds, you lift it off. Oh, I've got COVID. Or no, I don't. Literally, it's supposed to be that fast. That's what they're claiming anyway. So, but those aren't here yet. So the bottom line is the county has also put on us the responsibility for doing the testing and the contact tracing. So, and we've stepped up to that. We're going to get a report from administration about their efforts to make that happen. So, assuming all those other criteria are in place, that we are able to do everything, then the only thing missing is the 1,000 new teachers that we don't have. I suggest, since they changed the rules at the last minute, we submit the waiver and let the county reject it.
Right.
All right.
And then at the very least, you've done everything.
We've done everything that we can, and I want the public to know that we've done everything that we can. I have no idea if my proposal will. I know if I'll even get a second. When I throw it out. I don't know, but I'm going to propose that. And again, that isn't because I don't care about kids that may be medically impaired. That's why we're going to offer remote learning. It's not an either-or situation.
Right.
You get to pick. Both. You get to pick.
It's a buffet. These are the options for your kid learning.
And we're going to do the same with our staff. So if we have teachers that have medical conditions that don't allow them to be potentially exposed, they're at heightened risk, then there's a process you have to go through under state law, an iterative process where you back and forth about what ultimately can they perform the essential functions and all that. So what we'll do for them is, guess who's going to be doing distance learning teaching? Why would you try to put a teacher in a classroom that is medically impaired? You wouldn't do that.
Right.
So you give them an opportunity to continue what they love to do as teachers. You don't go into teaching because you hate it. What they love to do, and they do it in a healthy, safe way. So we're going to do that for all of our employees where we can, where it makes sense. We're going to try to make that offer. So kids that want to come back, parents that want to come back, they're going to be allowed to. Parents and kids that want to stay at home, they can stay at home. And same with staff. Those that want to come to work, great. Those that need to do distance learning, great. For medical reasons, we're more than happy to meet it. So I think it would be a win-win for everybody, because I can't get around the fundamental fact that nobody has been able to refute, and I've asked, show me where I'm wrong. Nobody has been able to. That in-person learning is inherently better experience for kids, for the vast majority of kids, than distance. So if we know that, we want to get them back as soon as is reasonably and safely possible. So does that mean we wait until there's 0 infections? No, because that means kids are getting hurt. Every day that we go by when we're not in person, kids are not getting the same level of educational outcomes as they would otherwise. So we want them back as soon as possible, but reasonably as soon as possible, with the appropriate social distancing, the appropriate safeguards. I think that's an eminently fair, reasonable proposal. And I think I will have the votes on the board to do that. First, from a waiver perspective, and then as we talk, because the other thing staff's going to do tonight is they're going to present what their plans are for when we can go back to a hybrid model for everybody.
Sure.
What's it going when we're in the red and we're not long enough in the red, we're no longer the county putting these ridiculous limitations on us. So what can we do and get ready for that? And then one of the key issues, frankly, for those that have high schoolers and middle schoolers, is what do you do for the kids that are taking 6-7 classes a day in a learning in a social distance, in a distance learning environment? You can pull that off, but if you go to more of a super block schedule, what you want to do, what you want to try to avoid.
Can I pause you for just 1 second, Greg? Sorry. Mm-hmm. All right, we're back, everybody. Sorry, I had to go to the bathroom. And you were saying a super block schedule.
Yes. TMI, buddy. Yeah. What you want to.
I drank a large coffee before this, okay? I'm very hydrated.
He did go to Pete's. I saw that. So what you want to avoid is you want to try to avoid a mixing of a bunch of cohorts, a bunch of groups of kids. Mm-hmm. So, and of course, what do you have at the secondary level? You have a bunch of periods, right? And you have different kids taking different classes, so you're mixing the cohorts together. So I'm going to be intrigued to see what staff comes up with in terms of how to deal with this problem at the secondary level in terms of ensuring that you don't have a lot of mixing of the different groups of kids. So one of the ways that people have talked about is creating like a super block. So what you'd have is, let's say you're taking Algebra 2, and you're taking Algebra 2 for how many instructional hours are required. You're going to do it not every one hour a day. You're going to do it for all the hours necessary to meet your instructional minute requirements for that class. And then once you're finished with that, you then go on to a second period, then a third period. So you may do, again, this is not mathematically accurate, but just make it easy. So for one class, you're going to go 6 hours a day for 2 weeks. And then that class is over. So you're in the same cohort. Now you go to another class, different cohort, different group of kids, because now you're taking, Spanish 3.
Sure.
Right? So now you're going to do however many hours you need to do that until you're over with that. So that's one possibility. One of the things I've asked, because again, having worked in education for as long as I have, it isn't about necessarily what is the most efficient, it's what's the most effective. So the question I have is, what's the most effective? What does the literature show? You hear that all the time in education. What does the literature show? What does the data show? What does the science show about how effective that is in terms of knowledge retention? Is it better to spread it out over weeks, a semester,
right?
An hour or so a day plus homework and stuff, or is it just as effective to cram it in a huge block of time? And I want to know what the latest literature is. So I've asked staff that question. What does the evidence show about whether that kind of thing would be effective?
Right.
And if the answer is it is effective, it's proven as effective, then that may be the answer. What we have to be careful of is setting up a set of cohorts in which they're mingling overly excessively and then not be in compliance with the rules that the state and the county have on cohort mixing. We've got to be
Sure.
careful about that. So that one's a little more up in the air. Elementary's pretty simple in the sense that, you don't go, you're a kindergartner, you're not going to this class and then an hour later going to another class, and
Sure.
2 hours later you're going to another. You're all in with the same kids.
Sure.
So elementary's easy. So secondary makes it a little more difficult. So what are we looking at that? And then again, we're looking at best practices.
Right.
What are other districts doing? What have other states that are ahead of us in this reopening done, and what's proven effective?
Right.
So,
That is one of the benefits of being lagging behind other states somewhat, because you can kind of quarterback what they did and say, okay, well, it appears that this worked and it appears that that didn't work, but you don't have to be the tip of the spear in this regard.
You never want to be. I've always said, I had a teacher once in high school who had been in Vietnam, and he'd gotten the joys of being the point guy on patrol in the jungle once, and they rotated because it was a very dangerous.
Sure.
Anybody that's a Vietnam vet knows a very dangerous position to be in, and so you didn't get stuck with it all the time. So they would rotate the danger. So being the first in anything, sometimes it's a good thing, and sometimes it's a really, really, really bad thing to be. You don't want to be. I always said you never want to be on the. You don't want to be on the bleeding edge. You want to be on the cutting edge, just before the blood starts to get drawn. So let somebody else be the bleeding edge, and we'll learn from their mistakes. I'm not sure. Also, I would agree that you need to be at the caboose. Going to be at the end, because now all that time you've wasted waiting to see how all the other cars did. You probably had a pretty good idea after the engine and a couple other cars went.
Right.
Time to get on board, by God.
And the cost of keeping our students out of school until, if we're the last ones there, the cost is not zero. The mental health cost, the educational cost, safety is obviously very important, but you have to recognize there's the American Association of Pediatrics pleading with the school boards and saying, look, you need to get kids back in school, because the risk and danger of having them stuck at home, not just from an educational standpoint, but a mental health and physical health.
Absolutely.
I mean, I have 3 little boys at home. It is not funny when things get crazy in my house. They can't leave because of the smoke outside. We can't even play in the backyard. I have a 4, 6, and an 8-year-old climbing all over each other all day long. They're doing learning at home. So the cost, and that's with my wife and I both trying to deal with it at the same time, it gets crazy. The cost is not zero. So yes, it's very easy to say, hey, look, let's let it all blow over. Let's let everything smooth out, and then we'll come back. Well, are you going to be happy with raising suicides? And are you going to be happy with the increased distress and depression of teenagers? Are you going to be happy with increased child abuse at home and alcoholism from parents? And these are not funny things or things that people want to talk about or acknowledge, but they are absolutely a cost.
They are absolutely real things. One of the things, I have a meeting once a week with other elected officials and senior executives in public agencies in this county, or in this valley. One of the things I was criticized for by one of my opponents was, I was beholden to the politicians in the county and not to the parents. And I would argue that is absolutely the opposite. So one of the reasons that we have buses, school buses, and 2,000 plus kids are bused, thousands of kids are bused in the district every day on regular ed buses, the big 40-foot long buses, is because I initiated my contacts with the city of San Ramon, the town of Danville, and the county of Contra Costa in helping them fund a school bus program, the Traffics program it's called. So if you
I remember that. I remember seeing signs all around town for that.
Exactly, right. We have and the general fund, the district's general fund, spends zero money on that program. It's through the generosity of the sales tax revenue that these cities and the county divert from their own needs. They get diverted to run a school bus program for the school district. That didn't happen because we had a crappy relationship with our sister agencies in the valley servicing the citizens. It happened because I had a good working relationship. And when I sat down with the county board of supervisors member, and I sat down with the mayors, and they were going, that's a heck of an idea. That's the right thing to do for kids. That's the right thing to do for this valley. And we've
Right.
crafted a way to do it. We got it approved by the County Transportation Authority. And voila, for the last decade, because of my close working relationship with other politicians in the Valley, we've got this wonderful school bus program. So we have a school resource officer program that this district does not pay full for. The majority of it is paid for by the cities that the two high schools are two in Danville and two in San Ramon. And they take money that they don't have to spend to help support this school district and its efforts to make sure that we have law enforcement available and nearby if there's ever a problem or an issue. So again, didn't happen because we had a bad relationship. It happened because we have a close working relationship. We do similar things related to our grounds maintenance and the pools. We have a shared use arrangement with our pools and our soccer fields and all the various things. So we work better in this valley than most school districts work with their cities and counties because we have a close working relationship. So that was a long intro to say, a few weeks ago we were talking, one of the people I was talking to, one of the chiefs of police, and he indicated that there was a substantial increase in calls for mental health distress calls in the, what do they call them, 5150s, I think.
Yeah.
So there's a market increase that had occurred in his region of the valley.
There is a tremendous amount of stress.
Absolutely, there is. So knowing that, can I, in good conscience, because I tell everybody, I'm going to say it now so parents understand that they're listening, and anybody else that is listening, I will always do what I think is best for the children of this valley. Not if I have a conflict between what is best for kids and what is best for adults, I will always vote in favor of the kids. Always. Bar none. If that means that I don't get endorsed by a group, so be it. If that means the majority of the parents decide to vote me out of office, so be it. I'm always going to do what I think is best for kids. And I would argue my fellow board members feel the exact same way. None of us are doing this because of the money. None of us are doing this because of ego. We're doing it because we want to give back. So the pandemic happens to be the single biggest thing, at least in my 20 years on the board, that we've had to face with, from an existential threat to providing a quality education. And there are conflicts between what the teachers union wants, has indicated publicly that they want, and what I think is best for kids. I'm always going to do what's best for kids. Period.
You and the board are effectively volunteers. I mean, yes, you get paid $4,800 a year, but you've been doing this so long, and you obviously we've been going for hours now, which is fantastic. I really appreciate it because you've obviously touched on so many different things.
But people say I don't talk a lot.
I don't know who. They obviously haven't hung out with you.
I'm not a person of few words.
So why are you continuing? You've been at this for 20 years. Right. You've obviously dedicated so much of your bandwidth and brain power to helping students. Why go for one more run?
Because I think this is the worst time to abandon the district and the kids and the parents and the taxpayers of this valley during the worst threat it's faced in its existence. There's something to be said for experience. I started in education in the 70s, going to college, driving a school bus. So my very first job was making sure the little kids got to school safely. And I would argue that's exactly what I'm doing now. I haven't changed. So whether I was a director of this or an executive director of that or an assistant superintendent or a vice chancellor or president of a school board, it's all, my entire adult life has been spent trying to protect kids and doing what I thought was best for kids. And I think I've got a pretty darn good track record. If you look at what I've done in the last 20 years, go on my website. You can see it, reelectmarvel.com. I have many things listed, many things I've done, including doing great things for the teachers of this district. We would not be where we are today, financially, in terms of our salaries in the labor market, if it wasn't for me and then ultimately, again, the rest of my fellow board members to agree to rethink how we were doing business so we could afford to give the raises that the teachers richly deserved. It's things like, if I get off the board, I can't push one of my other pet projects I want to push for, which is employee housing in the district. So I want to ensure that a teacher, a classified employee, can afford to live in the district they work. Now, you can't do that. You can't pay your way out of that problem. So the average family income to afford a 80-20 loan in Danville is something like $360,000 or $70,000, something like that. So if you're a new teacher, do you make that kind of money? No. If you're a 20-year teacher, do you make enough? No. Do you have to have a spouse or a partner to do that? Let's say we paid you right now, the average teacher on the schedule, the top, let's say you're at the top, and you and your spouse are both teachers in the district, and you're both at the top of the schedule. So you're going to make around, again, if you got some stipends in there, you're going to make $210,000, $212,000 a year, pretty good money as a family income. Can you afford a single family home in Danville at $212,000? And the answer is no, you can't. So can we triple? So there's three things you could do. One, you could triple the salaries of every employee in the district. So now you could afford to buy a home. Is that feasible? No. So, okay, that idea gets shot down. You can provide housing for employees with charging below market rent, because obviously it costs money to have built these things. You've got to pay the taxpayers back. And the third thing is you do absolutely nothing. We maintain the status quo. I don't believe in maintaining. I've been pushing. I've started this about a year ago. We need to look at providing affordable housing for our employees in this district, and that means we have to invest. So we're investing in our employees, and I think it's the right thing to do. And I'm not suggesting that we give free housing. I'm suggesting that whatever the market rate is, let's say let's pick a number to mathematically even, $3,000. So maybe we charge you $1,500 for a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. Whatever the going rate is, obviously we make it so it's affordable for our employees. I'm not worried, frankly. I'll be blunt. I'm not worried about the superintendent affording to live here. I'm worried about the teachers, the brand new teachers. I'm worried about the 20-year teacher who just lost her apartment in, I don't know, Livermore, or Tracy, and now needs to be able to try to find another place. Wouldn't it be great if she could live here?
It would be. It would be fantastic
if we could make that happen. So
I would have become a classroom teacher right out of college.
There you go.
I wouldn't be doing private
the days
tutoring.
of when you could buy a home. I remember when I graduated from high school. I lived in a fairly nice community, at least where the high school was located. It was a fairly nice community, and the homes there were going for $35,000 to $40,000, which seemed like a lot of money in those days. Little did I know.
You should have bought 10 of them.
Yeah, right. There's a little thing I was making 70 salary too, darn it. But the bottom line is those days are long gone. The affordability is long gone. So we either wring our hands and go, woe is us, what are we going to do? Not a darn thing, which is what most districts do. Or we can do what my management style is okay, we got a problem, let's figure out a way to fix it.
Right, get ahead of the problem.
Get ahead of it. Let's figure out how to do it.
Right.
And so I want to see that through. I think that's an important thing to see to fruition. I have managed budgets as large as $4 billion in my tenure in public sector. I think my expertise of helping to manage budgets, being on the board as long as I have, doesn't make me a liability. It actually makes me an asset as we try to figure out how to solve what is going to be a massive financial problem in 21-22. when the chickens come home to roost with the state's handling of the budget crisis for this year, they pushed the issue back a year. They did some really interesting accounting tricks that if you were a stock ownership company, you'd be in prison right now. They would have been, the Securities and Exchange Commission would have come knocking and arrested you. But it's a public legislature. So they did some really interesting accounting tricks that delayed the reality of the $54 billion that they're short. They pushed it into 21-22. If we don't get back from an economic perspective back to all cylinders operating, the problem is going to grow massively in 21-22. Is anybody in the state talking about opening up everything else by October 1? No. Nobody's got a date when this is all going to end. And the impact that it has on the economy. And if you don't have a robust economy, guess what? You don't have robust taxes coming in. So that's the problem. So 21-22, we're going to have the come to roost, the problems that were ignored by the state for 2021, compounded by the 21-22 budget shortfalls. And now I don't think but I don't see them being able to pull another magic accounting trick out of the hat for 21-22. I need to be part of the decision making that helps make sure kids are the least impacted possible. Are we going to get away with what I see coming in 21-22 unscathed? No. In my opinion, we are not. But we can limit the damage to the best of our ability so that kids and the effectiveness in the classroom are the least impacted possible.
That's
so
great.
I don't have any easy answers to what that's going to look like. With a $400 million budget, there are a lot of ways we could probably play around and maneuver, but I think we could easily be looking at a $35 to $40 million hit next year.
Well,
and
Greg,
we do not have $35 to $40 million in reserves, by the way.
Right.
So,
well, who does? I don't either, to be honest.
Well, why not? This podcast, I hear a rumor that GM funds you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. No?
Yeah. No. But I do have stickers if you want one. Anyway.
There you go.
Well, Greg, thank you so much for taking the time being here. I really appreciate it. I mean, you gave me a ton to think about. And again, I think
Hope
anybody
I gave your listeners a ton.
I was going to say, anybody listening to this has got a whole wealth of information to consider. So, again, thank you very much for what you're doing and what you have done.
Thank you.
Thank you.